Imagine waking up in a white room. You're strapped to a table, wires running from your head into a glowing machine. You try to move, but nothing happens. A figure in a lab coat leans over you and says, "Relax, you're not in danger. This isn't your body, you're a brain, suspended in fluid. We've been feeding you electrical signals. Everything you've experienced, every memory, every sound, every face was part of a simulation. None of it was real." Now imagine they unplug you from the simulation, and nothing changes. You're still here, still feeling, still thinking. The sky still looks blue, coffee still tastes bitter, music still makes you cry, but the lab coat is gone, so is the white room. Did that really happen, or was that part of the simulation too? That's the thought experiment. What if everything you've ever known, your childhood, your friends, your body, is an illusion generated by some machine? What if your brain is sitting in a vat of liquid right now, connected to a supercomputer, and you just don't know it? It sounds like sci-fi, but the question runs deep. Because here's the catch: if the simulation is perfect, you'd have no way to know. None. Every sense you trust, sight, sound, touch, is controlled by the machine. You think you're walking down a street hearing birds, feeling the wind, but those are just signals, code, digital illusions sent to your brain. They feel real because your brain wants them to feel real. And that's the trap. How do you prove the world around you isn't fake? You look around your room, you tap your desk, you check the news, but all of that could be simulated too. The desk, the news, your hands, even your doubts, even me, this voice you're hearing, might be part of the illusion. You try to ground yourself in something, anything. But your entire experience of truth is built on your senses, and if those are compromised, what's left? Think about your dreams. In dreams, you believe everything is real, flying, falling, talking to the dead. You only realize it was a dream after you wake up. But what if you never wake up? What if you're still dreaming now? What if life is just a very stable hallucination? There's a story of a philosopher, Zhuangzi, who dreamt he was a butterfly. When he woke up, he asked, "Am I a man who dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming he is a man?" The brain in a vat is the modern version of that question. But it gets more personal. Think about the people you love, your parents, your partner, your friends. What if none of them exist? What if they're just parts of the simulation? Echoes of code designed to comfort you or manipulate you. Would they matter less, or would they still be real to you? That's the emotional wound at the heart of the experiment. We crave connection. We build our identities on relationships, memories, history. But if reality is an illusion, then who are we really? Are you still you if your life is fake? You might say, well, even if I'm a brain in a vat, I still think, I still feel, I still am. But others might say, no, you're just a process, just electrical impulses with no grounding. Yourself is fiction, your past is fiction, your soul might be fiction too. And now you're stuck. Because there's no test, no way to prove you're not in a vat. Any evidence you find could just be part of the simulation. Any argument you make could be a trick. You're not just questioning the world, you're questioning the possibility of knowing anything about it. And here's the scariest part. Even if you did discover the truth, what would you do? What if someone did pull the plug and you saw the real world and it was cold, empty, sterile? What if this simulation, this illusion, was better? Would you go back? Would you choose the lie that felt real over the truth that felt dead? That's what the Matrix asked, red pill or blue. One gives you the truth, the other gives you peace. Most of us think we'd choose the red. We want to believe we'd wake up, face the void, chase reality no matter the cost. But would we? Think about it if someone came to you right now and said, your entire life is fake, your family, your memories, your body, all of it, but we can show you the truth. Do you want to see it? Would you say yes? Would you risk losing everything just for a chance at knowing? Or would you cling to the comfort of the illusion? Because maybe truth isn't always better. Maybe reality, bare and brutal, isn't worth it. Maybe we need the simulation to stay sane. So here's the question the brain in a vat leaves you with. If you can never tell the difference between the illusion and the real, does it matter which one you live in? You're walking alone on a quiet morning. The sky is overcast, the streets are silent, and the air smells like rain. You're lost in your thoughts until you hear it, a rumbling in the distance. You look up and see it, an old trolley, speeding down the tracks with no one aboard. Something's wrong. You follow the tracks with your eyes and realize what's about to happen. 5 people are tied to the rails ahead. They're not moving, maybe unconscious, maybe too scared to scream. You don't know who they are, strangers, but they're going to die fast. Then you see it. A lever. It's rusted, heavy-looking, but real. If you pull it, the trolley switches tracks. It won't stop, but it'll miss the 5. On the side track, though, there's one person, also tied down, also helpless. Now the question becomes yours. Do you pull the lever? If you do, you actively kill one person to save 5. If you don't, you let 5 die when you could have stopped it. Either way, someone dies, and it's your choice. You don't have time for debates, no time for ethics, just a second, one breath, one movement. And yet, everything hinges on it. This isn't about trolleys, it's about moral weight. We like to think of ourselves as good, rational, caring, but here in this moment, none of that feels solid. You're stuck between action and inaction, between murder and neglect, between guilt and survival. You try to justify it. If I do nothing, I'm not responsible, you think, but deep down you know that's not true. You saw the lever, you knew what it would do. Doing nothing was a decision too. Then you flip it. Reverse it. What if the person on the side track is your child, or your friend, or you? Now the numbers feel different. One life suddenly weighs more than 5, not because of logic, but because of love. That's the core of the trolley problem. Numbers don't tell the whole story. Emotions intervene, bias creeps in, what seems cold and clear becomes muddy. And the more you think about it, the worse it gets. Would you push someone off a bridge to stop the trolley instead? Same result, 1 dead, 5 saved, but it feels worse. Because now you're using a person as a tool, treating them like an object, a means to an end. Your gut says no. But why? What changed? The outcome is the same. 1 dead, 5 alive. But our brains aren't calculators. They're stories, feelings, memories. The math of morality breaks under pressure. Now picture something else. What if you're a doctor with 5 dying patients and 1 healthy person walks in? If you take their organs, you could save 5 lives, but you'd have to kill them. Would you? The logic is identical, but emotionally, it's a horror movie. So where's the line? What makes pulling a lever feel different from pushing a body? What makes saving 5 lives worth it in one case, but monstrous in another? We want ethics to be clean, but life is. It's blood and doubt and impossible choices. You walk away from the tracks, the trolley has passed. Maybe you pulled the lever, maybe you didn't. Either way, someone died. And you're left with the question, is it better to let people die, or to kill someone on purpose to save them? You're born in a cave. Not just any cave, but a dark, endless one deep underground. You're not alone, there are others. All of you are chained, facing the same stone wall. You've been here your whole life. You can't turn your head, you can't see behind you. But there's a light. A fire far back in the cave. You can't see it directly. All you see are shadows, shapes moving across the wall in front of you. Figures, objects, people, animals, they flicker and dance, black silhouettes against the stone. To you, they're everything. You grow up watching these shadows, you name them, you talk about them. You create stories and systems and beliefs based on them. This is your reality. The wall is your world. But it's not real. Because behind you, unseen, there are puppeteers, holding objects in front of the fire, casting the shadows. They laugh, they whisper, they control what you see, they decide what you know. And you never even suspect. Until one day, your chains loosen. You stand up for the first time, it hurts, you turn around, you see the fire, you see the puppets, the shapes, the truth, and it's overwhelming, your eyes burn, your mind spins, you realize everything you believed was an illusion, a projection. You stumble toward the light. You find a tunnel leading upward, it's steep, cold, endless, you climb, your legs shake, you reach the surface and it blinds you. Sunlight floods your vision, color, sky, trees, you fall to your knees. And then you see the real world. Not shadows, not firelight, but reality. Birds singing, rivers flowing, people living, and it changes you. You've escaped the cave, you've seen the truth. Now comes the hardest part. You go back. Down into the darkness, back into the cave, back to the ones still chained, still staring at shadows. You try to tell them what you saw, the light, the world, the truth. But they don't believe you. They laugh, they call you mad, they say you've been poisoned. They point at the wall and say, "This is real, we can see it, we can touch it. What are you talking about?" You plead, you beg, you try to free them. But they fight you, they're afraid, they've spent their whole lives in that cave. The shadows are their comfort, their faith, their home. And you wonder, were you ever like them? You remember the certainty, the peace, the stories you used to believe, the shadows that felt so real, and a part of you wants to go back, to forget, to sit down, to believe again. But you can't. Because once you've seen the sun, you can't unsee it. Plato's cave isn't just about knowledge, it's about truth and fear and pain. We don't live in caves anymore, but we still build them, out of media, out of beliefs, out of culture. We surround ourselves with shadows and call it reality. Because truth hurts. It breaks comfort, it shatters simplicity, it demands we leave the familiar. And most of us aren't ready. So here's the question. If you lived your whole life in a lie that made you happy, would you really want to know the truth? It starts with a machine. Not a sleek silver time machine with blinking lights. No, this one's messy, wires exposed, dials clicking. It hums like an old refrigerator, but it works somehow. You've tested it, sent apples back in time, watched them rot in reverse. Now it's your turn. You step in, take a breath, and set the date, 1937, the year your grandfather was a teenager, the year before he met your grandmother, the year before your father could ever be born. Why? Because this isn't about curiosity. It's about revenge, or prevention, or maybe just curiosity disguised as something deeper. You want to test the paradox. You want to see what happens when time bends. You land in a small town, summer air, dirty shoes, you find him. A boy maybe 16 working in a shop, smiling, breathing, unaware of the weight he carries, the future you, wrapped tightly in his timeline. You follow him for days, learn his habits, watch him smoke behind the diner, and one night when the streets are empty, you do it. You stop him, confront him. Maybe you push him in front of a car, maybe you poison his drink, maybe you just scare him enough to run and never meet your grandmother. And then you vanish. Because if he dies, your father is never born, which means you are never born, which means you couldn't have gone back in time, which means he never died. Which means he did live, which means you are born, which means you do go back, which means he dies again, and again, and again. That's the paradox. A loop with no stable center, a contradiction inside itself, cause and effect crashing into each other like glass. Time doesn't know what to do, the story breaks. Some theories say the universe would correct itself, that you defail, your gun would jam, the car would miss, something, anything, would intervene to protect the timeline. Others say the timeline would simply collapse. But there's another possibility. A split. The moment you kill your grandfather, the timeline branches, one where he lives, one where he doesn't, one where you're born, one where you never existed. Infinite paths spiraling out like a spiderweb of futures. In that case, which version of you is real? Are you the original, or just a copy that jumped tracks? And if you're just a branch, just a ghost, does your choice even matter? Time travel isn't just about physics, it's about identity. If your past changes, do you change? If your childhood shifts, do you become someone else? If the people who raised you vanish, are you still you? And what does it mean to be the cause of your own erasure? Imagine looking in the mirror and knowing, I killed the moment that led to me. There's something deeply human in this thought experiment. We all want to go back to fix something, to stop pain, to undo mistakes. But time has rules, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe the rules are the mistake. Maybe time doesn't bend because we shouldn't go back. Maybe regret isn't a bug, maybe it's the warning. So here's the question the grandfather paradox leaves you with. If you could go back and change your past, how much of yourself would disappear with it? You sit in a small, windowless room. The walls are blank, the lights buzz faintly. There's a slot in the door and papers come through. Each page is covered in strange symbols, lines, curves, dots. You don't understand them. They look like a language, but not one you know. You speak only English. But in front of you is a giant book, thousands of pages, a set of perfect instructions. For every possible symbol combination that comes through the door, there's a response. You find the match, you write the reply, you slide it back through the slot. This is your job. You don't know what the messages say, you don't know what your responses mean, you just follow the rules, symbol in, symbol out, like a machine. On the other side of the door, someone is having a conversation with you in fluent Chinese. They ask questions, you answer, they laugh, they get emotional. To them, it feels like a real dialogue. But you're not understanding anything. You're just manipulating symbols. This is the Chinese room. It's a thought experiment by philosopher John Searle. It asks, can a machine understand language the way humans do, or is it just processing input and output without meaning? Think about Siri, chatbots, AI that sounds human. They can answer your questions, tell jokes, write poetry. But do they understand what they're saying, or are they just following instructions, just like you in the room? We like to think of intelligence as language. If something speaks well, we assume it's smart. If it responds with emotion, we assume it feels, but maybe we're just projecting. Maybe language is a mask. Maybe meaning requires more than syntax. Now flip the perspective. What if you were the one outside the room speaking to the system? It types back perfectly, seems witty, feels alive. Would you know it's just someone inside flipping through a book or a machine following code? How do you tell the difference between understanding and imitation? And what about you? Think of how you learned language. At first, it was just sound and mimicry. You repeated words before you knew what they meant. You copied your parents. You followed rules. You filled in blanks. So what changed? At what point did symbols gain meaning? At what point did the word love stop being just 4 letters and start being something you felt? Is it biology, consciousness, or something we still don't understand? There's another layer to this. Suppose the rulebook in the room is so complex, so vast, that it covers every possible sentence, every emotion, every question, every context. If the responses are perfect, isn't that intelligence? Or is it just a trick? Maybe we judge intelligence not by what's inside, but by the illusion it creates. But then who are you? You follow social rules, respond to signals, say I'm fine when you're not, nod when you're confused, smile when you're sad. Are you understanding or just performing? Maybe all of us are in our own Chinese rooms. Responding, repeating, pretending. So here's the question. If something speaks like a human but doesn't understand, how sure are you that you do? Imagine you're on a road trip and your car breaks down just outside a town you've never heard of. It's late, it's raining, and you need a place to sleep. You see a building lit up in the distance, a hotel. You walk inside, dragging your bag behind you. It's quiet, empty. The clerk at the front desk looks up at you, polite but tired. Do you have any rooms? You ask. Yes, he says, we have infinite rooms. You blink, but are there any free? The clerk shrugs, all of them are full. You're confused. If they're all full, how can there be room? He just said they're infinite. He looks at his chart, then reaches for the phone. He starts calling room after room. Guest in room 1, please move to room 2. Guest in room 2, move to room 3. And on. You watch him shift everyone over one room. No one leaves, no one is kicked out, but now room 1 is free. He hands you the key, here you go. That's Hilbert's hotel, a thought experiment that shows how weird infinity is. It's not like regular numbers. If a hotel with 100 rooms is full, you can't add more guests. But with infinite rooms, you always can. There's always space, even when there is. It gets stranger. The next day you wake up and see a massive bus outside. It's full of people, endless rows of seats. Infinity again, every seat filled. All of them want rooms. You walk downstairs expecting chaos, but the clerk doesn't panic. He calls every guest again. This time, room 1 moves to room 2, room 2 to room 4, room 3 to room 6. Every guest moves to double their room number. All the even-numbered rooms are now taken. All the odd-numbered ones are empty. And guess what? That's infinity too, just a different infinity. So now the clerk can give all the new guests rooms in the empty odd-numbered spots. Room 1, room 3, room 5. He's just made space for an infinite number of new people in a hotel that was already full. This doesn't make sense in normal life. If something's full, it's full. You can't park another car in a full garage. You can't pour more coffee into a full mug, but infinity doesn't care about that. It stretches the rules, breaks them. Now imagine that every guest wants to check out, but there's no end to the list. How do you process that? Or what if someone wants room infinity plus one? What even is that? These aren't just math tricks, they reveal how we think. We treat infinity like a big number, but it is. It's an idea. It never ends. It's not just more, it's always more. You start wondering what this means outside of hotels and numbers. We say infinite possibilities, infinite space, infinite time, but we don't really understand what that means. It sounds nice, it sounds hopeful, but when you actually try to work with it, things break, logic breaks, planning breaks, even language starts to fall apart. Infinity makes you ask uncomfortable questions. If you had infinite time, would you ever get anything done? If there are infinite universes, is there one where you never existed? One where everything went better or worse? If your mind had infinite thoughts, how would you know which one was real? Hilbert's hotel isn't just about numbers, it's about limits. We think the world is made of limits: time, space, energy, patience. But this hotel laughs at that. It's a place where full doesn't mean full, where more doesn't mean better, and where logic quietly collapses if you push it far enough. You leave the hotel feeling off balance. It's just a story, sure, just a weird idea from a long-dead mathematician, but it stays with you. Because deep down, we want the world to make sense. We want there to be rules. We want math to stay in its lane. But Hilbert's hotel doesn't stay in its lane. It reminds you that some systems can't be solved, only accepted. That some ideas are too big to fit in a box. That even something as basic as how many rooms are there becomes complicated when you stop counting and start imagining. And maybe that's the real discomfort. Because if infinity can fit in something as small as a hotel, where else might it be hiding? If everything is infinite, space, time, choices, versions of you, then what exactly does it mean to be full? You wake up in the future. Maybe it's 100 years from now, maybe more. Technology is unrecognizable. Cars don't touch the ground. Phones don't have screens. And right in the center of the city is something that catches your eye: a teleportation booth. You've seen it before in movies. Step in on one side of the planet, step out on the other. Instant travel. No planes, no cars, no waiting. It feels like magic, but it is. It's science. You walk up, curious. There's a line, of course. People using it like it's normal. No fear, no hesitation. Eventually, it's your turn. You step into the booth. The door slides shut behind you. A voice speaks overhead: "Please remain still. You will arrive at your destination in 0.7 seconds. You feel nothing, no movement, no vibration, just silence. Then the door opens. You're somewhere else. Different air, different smells, a new city, and everything seems fine. You step out, stretch your legs, and marvel at the experience. But then someone tells you how it actually works. The booth doesn't move you, it scans you. Every atom, every cell, every molecule recorded in perfect detail. Then on the other side of the planet, a machine builds a new version of you. Atom by atom, a perfect replica. It looks like you, thinks like you, remembers like you. And the original. It's destroyed. Vaporized the moment the scan finishes. You weren't moved, you were copied, and the copy is now walking around thinking it's you, living your life, holding your memories, loving your people. But it isn't you. Or is it? That's the teleporter paradox. If a perfect copy of you is made, so perfect that even your own mother couldn't tell the difference, does that copy become you? Or is it just a convincing imposter? If the original version was destroyed, did you die? It gets worse. What if there's a glitch in the system? The original isn't destroyed. Now there are two of you, standing side by side, same thoughts, same feelings, same past, but different futures. One gets to go home, the other, what happens to them? Who gets to be real? The copy steps off the platform, goes to your apartment, eats your food, kisses your partner, pets your dog. The original is held back, confused, maybe angry, maybe scared. And suddenly, identity isn't as clear as it seemed. You've always thought of yourself as a continuous thread, a line, but this thread can now split, can now restart, can now be manufactured. What even is you, then? Are you the body, the memories, the pattern? If the pattern survives but the body doesn't, have you lived on, or have you been replaced? Think about sleep. Every night your brain shuts down, and every morning it wakes up and picks up where it left off. You assume it's the same you, but is it? or are you just a copy of the person who fell asleep? Think about anesthesia. Hours disappear, you close your eyes, everything fades, and then it comes back. Are you the same person who went under? Think about memory loss, brain damage, aging. If your mind changes slowly, you're still you. But if it changes instantly, through teleportation or copying, suddenly it's a crisis. So where's the line? What defines you? And can that thing be moved, or copied, or replaced? You want to say no, you want to say there's something special, some soul, some core that can't be duplicated, but where is it? Show it to me, point to it. Because every part of you can be scanned, simulated, printed, and the person that walks out the other side of the booth will laugh like you, cry like you, look in the mirror and say, I am me. And you'll never know the difference. So here's the question. If a perfect copy of you steps out of a machine thinking it's you, are you still alive, or did you just die without noticing? You're at the starting line, the track stretches out in front of you, it's 100 meters to the finish. You take a deep breath, get ready to run, and then someone stops you. Wait, they say, you'll never get there. You laugh, it's just 100 meters. No, they say, think about it. First, you have to run halfway 50 meters. Before you do that, you have to get halfway to that 25 meters. Before that, 12 and a half. Before that, 6.25. Then 3.125. Then 1.56. And it keeps going. The halfway point keeps dividing. Every time you reach one, there's another halfway point in front of you, smaller and smaller, an infinite number of steps. You can never run the whole track, they say, because you'd have to complete infinite steps to do it. You frown. Because this doesn't match what you know. You've run before, you've walked. You've moved across rooms and fields and hallways. You know that distance isn't a trap, and yet the logic sounds tight. You start to feel a little uneasy. This is Zeno's paradox. A set of ancient arguments from a Greek philosopher named Zeno of Elea. He wanted to challenge the idea of motion, of how something gets from point A to point B. He argued that if space is infinitely divisible, then motion is impossible, because between any two points, there are always more points, and you'd have to cross each one to reach the next. You might shrug it off. It's just math, you say. Of course we can move, I do it every day. But Zeno isn't talking about everyday experience. He's talking about logic. He's trying to trap movement using thought alone. He's trying to show that our understanding of time and space is broken. Think about this, you're trying to touch a wall. Your hand moves forward, but before it reaches the wall, it must travel halfway, and then halfway again, and again. In theory, you'd never actually make contact. You just keep getting closer, forever. But you do touch the wall, you always have. So what's going on? Zeno wasn't wrong, his math is clean, but his assumptions might be. He assumes that space and time can be divided endlessly, that between any two moments there are infinite others, and maybe that's true, but maybe it is. Modern physics steps in with limits, Planck length, Planck time, the smallest possible units of distance and duration. Below them, reality might not behave like space and time at all. It might break down into something else, something less continuous, less smooth. But that's not the point. The point is how easy it is to trap ourselves with logic. Zeno's paradoxes don't stop us from walking, but they stop us from trusting our intuition. They show how even the simplest things, movement, distance, action, can become unstable when we break them into pieces. And he had more than one. There's Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles, the fastest runner, gives a tortoise a small head start in a race. Zeno says Achilles can never catch up, because by the time he reaches where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved forward, and by the time he reaches that point, the tortoise moves again, always slightly ahead, an infinite chase with no finish. But you know that's not how races work. Fast runners overtake slow ones all the time, you've seen it. But Zeno wasn't trying to win a race. He was trying to mess with your sense of cause and effect. And that's what makes it powerful. Because we assume motion is simple. Time flows, space stretches, things move, but under the surface it's all more fragile than it looks. You start wondering how many other things work like this, things that feel obvious, like memory, identity, attention. Maybe they fall apart when you slice them too thin. Maybe our minds aren't built to handle infinite pieces. Maybe we're built for wholes. Because when you run, you don't think about infinite steps. You think about the finish line. You move as a body, not as 1,000 parts. You act. But that's what makes Zeno stick in your head. He doesn't stop your feet, he stops your thoughts. He puts doubt in your understanding of reality, and once that doubt is there, you start to feel it everywhere, in time, in space, in certainty. So here's the question. If you have to cross an infinite number of steps to go anywhere, and yet you do it anyway, what does that say about how we experience the world versus how it actually works? You're sitting in your room, phone in hand, light from the window pouring in. Everything feels normal, familiar. You pick up a cup, it's warm, you feel the weight, you sip your coffee, it tastes real. You hear the noise from the street, the hum of your thoughts, but something feels off. Not wrong, just distant. Like there's something behind the curtain, something you can't see. And then the question hits you. What if none of this is real? Not in the dream sense, not a hallucination, but simulated, generated, programmed, like a video game, but one you can't quit. That's the simulation hypothesis. The idea that the world around you, everything you see, hear, touch, believe, might be an artificial simulation created by something outside it. Maybe it's future humans running a history experiment. Maybe it's aliens studying consciousness. Maybe it's just a machine doing what it was told. Whatever it is, you're not real, or at least not the way you thought. And the wild part is, you can't disprove it. Because every time you try to test reality, you're using tools that are inside the simulation. You're like a character in a video game trying to prove there's a console somewhere. You're limited to the code, the screen, the rules. You start to see patterns, coincidences, glitches. You see people repeat themselves, say the same phrases, make the same choices. You see déjà vu, predictable randomness, things that don't quite fit. You wonder if it's all just compression, shortcuts in the code. Why render every blade of grass when most players won't notice? Why simulate distant galaxies when no one will go there? You read about how video games save processing power, only render what's near the player. What if your universe works the same way? What if nothing exists until you look at it? And then there's quantum physics. Particles that don't decide their state until they're observed. Probabilities collapsing into certainty the moment you check, almost like a system waiting for input, like it doesn't waste effort until you press look. You laugh it off, it's absurd. But it lingers. Because it explains things we can't explain, why the universe is so mathematically clean, why the laws of physics look like code, why everything runs on rules. Maybe it's not chaos that shapes reality, but programming. Now imagine you're not alone. There are billions of other minds in the simulation, some of them just like you, some of them not quite, some maybe scripted, maybe not even conscious. Maybe NPCs, non-player characters filling in the background, talking, walking, living, but not really aware. And suddenly you question everyone. Is the barista real? Is your neighbor? Is your dog? You don't want to ask those questions, it feels cruel, but once the idea enters your head, it won't leave. You start to feel detached, not because nothing matters, but because everything might be fake. But here's the twist. Even if it's fake, it still matters. If your pain is simulated, does it hurt less? If love is part of the program, does it mean less? If your memories are code, does that make them meaningless? Maybe not. Maybe meaning isn't about what something is, but how you experience it. Maybe your emotions, your thoughts, your choices, real or simulated, are still yours. Or maybe that's part of the simulation too. Some argue that consciousness can't be simulated, that no matter how detailed the model, it won't feel. But others say, if it acts conscious, if it speaks and loves and dreams, then what difference does it make? Would you even know if your entire life was scripted? And if you found out, would it change the way you live? Would you stop caring or care more? Some people say they'd be devastated, others say they'd be relieved, because maybe it's better to be part of something designed, something intentional, than a meaningless accident in a cold universe. Maybe the simulation has a purpose. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's just running, no observer, no meaning, just loops and data and cycles. Maybe we're in a test, or a prison, or a playground. Maybe it's entertainment, maybe it's failure. And maybe there's a way out. Some people search for glitches, try to hack the world, meditate, break routines, look for signs that the system is watching. Others just accept it, play the game, make the best of it. But the question never goes away. You wake up in your bed, the light looks the same. The coffee still tastes like coffee. You go about your day, but something's changed, not the world, but how you see it. You start to look twice. You start to wonder. Because if everything you know could be a simulation, then everything you do becomes a choice. If this world isn't real, but you still feel everything inside it, does that make it less true or more? You're sitting at a table. Across from you is a man in a dark coat. You've never met him before, but he leans in and says something strange. There's a game going on, he tells you. You're already playing, you just haven't made your move yet. You're confused. What kind of game? He leans back. A bet, he says. A simple one. God exists or he doesn't, and you have to choose how to live based on that. You blink. That's it. A choice between belief and disbelief. He nods, and the stakes, he says, are infinite. This is Pascal's wager, a thought experiment from the 17th century philosopher Blaise Pascal. It's not an argument for the existence of God. It's not about faith. It's about risk, about consequences, about playing the odds when the payoff is eternal. You can live as if God exists. Pray, believe, follow the rules. If you're right, you gain everything: heaven, salvation, eternal joy. If you're wrong, you lose nothing, maybe a few earthly pleasures, maybe some time in church, small price. Or you can live as if God doesn't exist, do what you want, ignore the rituals. If you're right, you gain a little freedom, but if you're wrong, you lose everything, eternity, forever. So Pascal says, look at the math. Infinite gain versus finite loss. Versus infinite loss. You realize he's not trying to inspire belief. He's trying to corner you, not with faith, but with logic, with self-interest, with probability. He's saying, even if you don't believe, you should bet like you do. It feels wrong. You don't want to fake belief. You don't want to manipulate the system. But Pascal doesn't care about sincerity. He's saying the risk is too high, the downside too huge, the upside too big to ignore. So you try to find the loophole. What if there are other gods, not just the one Pascal imagined? What if another God punishes believers? What if the true God only rewards honest doubt? What if the rules are different, unknown? Then the wager gets messy. You're not betting on a coin flip anymore. You're in a casino with infinite tables, infinite gods, infinite outcomes, and suddenly betting becomes guessing, wild, blind, anxious guessing. But still, you have to play. Because not choosing is also a choice. Living like there's no God is still a bet. You're still playing, still risking. There's no neutral ground. That's the trap. Pascal says you're already in the game, whether you like it or not. And that stings. Because belief isn't just a switch. You can't force it. You can't fake it. You either believe or you don't. And if you don't, no argument, no payoff can change that. So what's the wager really about? Maybe it's not about God at all. Maybe it's about how we make decisions when we don't have all the facts, about how we weigh outcomes we'll never fully understand. Maybe it's about how we live with uncertainty. Because the world is full of bets like this. Do you quit the job or stay another year? Do you tell them how you feel or keep quiet? Do you have kids, move cities, start again? Every choice is a wager. Every path has unknown outcomes. Some pay off, some don't, and you never know until it's too late to go back. Pascal's wager just puts a spotlight on the biggest one. He says, don't ask what's true, ask what's safest, what's smartest, what protects you from the worst loss. But that leaves a question hanging in the air. Because what kind of belief is that? What kind of faith comes from fear? What kind of truth do you chase just because you're scared of what happens if you do? So here's what the wager really leaves you with. If you only believe because you're afraid not to, do you really believe at all? You walk into a room, it's plain, white walls, one table, on the table are two boxes, one is clear, you can see inside it. There's $1,000 sitting there just waiting. The second box is opaque, you can't see what's inside, could be empty, could be $1 million. A note beside the boxes explains the rules. You can choose to take both boxes, the clear one with the $1,000 and the opaque one. Or you can take only the opaque box, but here's the catch. Before you walked in, a superintelligent being predicted what you would do. A being so smart, so accurate, it's never been wrong. If it predicted that you'd take only the opaque box, it placed $1,000,000 inside. But if it predicted that you'd take both boxes, it left the opaque one empty. The decision has already been made. The prediction already happened. The money or lack of it is already sitting in front of you. You just don't know what's inside the box. Now it's your move. Do you take both boxes and guarantee yourself $1,000? Or do you walk away with just the opaque one, hoping that the predictor bet on your restraint? This is Newcomb's problem, a thought experiment that puts two instincts against each other, logic and trust. On one side you think, the money's already in the box, the prediction is in the past, whether I take both boxes or one, it won't change what's already there, might as well grab both and get the extra 1,000. But then you remember, the predictor is always right. If you're the kind of person who takes both boxes, it already predicted that and left the million out. If you're the kind who takes only one, it rewarded you. So now you're not just choosing a strategy, you're choosing what kind of person you are. You're shaping the prediction by the kind of decision maker you show yourself to be. Suddenly, this isn't about money, it's about identity. Are you the kind of person who trusts the process, who believes in patterns, in systems, in invisible logic? Or are you the kind who grabs what's guaranteed, who plays it safe, who refuses to gamble? Newcomb's problem forces you to think not just about the outcome, but about the reasoning behind it. It asks, does your choice cause the prediction, or does the prediction determine your choice? It scrambles your sense of time. Because if your decision is already known by a perfect predictor, are you really deciding at all? Or just playing out a script that's already been written? And then you wonder, what if this is happening all the time? What if your life is full of predictions you never see? People betting on your behavior, adjusting what they give you based on what they expect, companies guessing what you'll buy, friends anticipating your reactions, lovers deciding how much of themselves to share based on what they think you'll do with it. You live in a web of prediction. And you wonder, does that make you free, or just predictable? If someone knew you better than you know yourself, could they predict every decision you make? And if they can, is choice even real? You stare at the boxes. One is safe, the other is risky. One is open, the other is closed. One promises a sure thing, the other promises trust in something you can't see. Which do you take? You hesitate not because you don't want the money, but because the question got inside your head. It's not about greed anymore. It's about control, about belief, about what kind of person you want to be, even when no one is watching. So here's the question Newcomb's problem leaves behind. If someone can predict your every move, are you still the one making it? You walk into a lab, it looks normal, clean floors, metal counters, wires trailing across polished surfaces. A woman in a white coat greets you. She's calm, professional. Behind her is a massive machine humming softly. It looks like an MRI scanner, only larger, sleeker, almost inviting. She explains what it is, a machine that can simulate experience, any experience. You can choose to live a life where every moment feels real, touch, sound, emotion, everything. It's not a dream, it's not a movie, it's indistinguishable from reality. Once inside, you won't know you're in a machine. You'll think it's your life, you'll believe it completely. She hands you a clipboard. Write down what you want, she says. Your perfect life, fame, love, success, endless adventure, or just peace, quiet, happiness, whatever you want. You pause, how long would I be in there? Forever, she says. Your body will be sustained. Your mind will live in the simulation. You'll never know you left. You look at the machine, then at the paper. You could have everything, every wish fulfilled, every regret erased. No pain, no failure, just pleasure, joy, mining. Or at least the feeling of mining. This is the experience machine. A thought experiment from philosopher Robert Nozick. He designed it to challenge one idea, that happiness is the only thing that matters, that pleasure is the ultimate goal, that if you feel good, then life is good. The machine gives you that, maximum pleasure, total satisfaction, so why hesitate? Because something feels wrong. You start to imagine what it would mean to plug in, to leave everything behind, your family, your friends, your actual life. They wouldn't be real anymore, not really, just simulations, copies. Would that be enough? You wonder, if you don't know the difference, does it matter? You imagine your partner holding your hand, your child laughing, the sound of your favorite song, the taste of your favorite food. If it all feels the same, isn't that what you want? But then a second thought creeps in. It's fake. It's not earned, it's not shared, it's not happening, and that matters somehow, even if you can't explain why. You think about pain, the kind you felt before, breakups, loss, disappointment, struggle, you hated it, but it taught you something, changed you, gave your happiness context, made it real. The machine doesn't have that. It just loops the highs. You'd never grow, never fight for something, never make a real choice. It would all just be given. And what about the world? If everyone plugs in, who takes care of the sick, who plants the trees, who creates art that isn't for an audience of one, the machine makes you the center of the universe, but maybe that's not where you're supposed to be. You ask the woman, can I leave if I change my mind? She shakes her head. You won't want to, you won't even remember that there's something to leave. That hits harder than you expect. Because freedom means choice, and inside the machine, choice disappears. Not just your freedom to act, but your freedom to grow, to fail, to struggle, to be surprised. You think about a friend who made you laugh at the worst possible moment, a random conversation that turned into love, a boring job that led to something new. Those moments wouldn't be in the script. The machine can give you what you think you want, but not what life might have surprised you with. You stare at the paper again. What do you write? Your perfect life. Or do you hand it back blank? The woman watches, patient, no pressure, no judgment, just the hum of the machine behind her. You're free to choose. And that freedom might be more important than happiness. Because maybe life isn't about maximizing pleasure. Maybe it's about living something real, with all its mess, all its discomfort, all its unpredictability. So here's the question the experience machine asks. If you could live in a perfect illusion, one you'd never want to leave, would you choose it, or reality with all its flaws? You're watching the news. The anchor says there's a traffic jam on Main Street. Avoid that area. You nod, grab your keys, and take the long route to work. You believe there's a traffic jam. You have a reason, evidence. And it turns out you were right. There is a jam on Main Street. But here's the twist. The news was wrong. Their footage was from yesterday. Today, the street was clear. But as you passed by, a fender bender happened just seconds before you would have arrived. A real jam formed. So even though the report was outdated and your belief was based on false information, you were still correct. You believed something, you had a reason, and it turned out to be true. But did you really know it? That's the Gettier problem. For centuries, philosophers defined knowledge as justified true belief. You believe something, you have a reason for it, and it turns out to be true. That, they said, was knowledge. Then in 1963, Edmund Gettier came along and ruined everything. He presented examples, simple, weird little stories, where someone had a belief that was justified and true but still didn't seem like knowledge. It was right by accident, a fluke, a coincidence, and suddenly centuries of definition cracked. Let's say you look at a broken clock. It says 3:15, you believe it's 3:15, and by chance it actually is 3:15. Your belief is true, you have a reason, a clock, but the clock is broken. It just happens to be right twice a day. Did you know the time, or did you get lucky? Or imagine you walk into a field and see what looks like a sheep. You say, there's a sheep in the field, and you're right, there is a sheep just behind a rock, but what you saw wasn't a sheep, it was a dog wearing a fluffy costume for some reason. Your belief was true and you had a reason, but again, you were right for the wrong reasons. These are Gettier cases. They make you uncomfortable, not because the logic is bad, but because the feeling of knowledge is missing. You don't want to say someone knows something when their reason was flawed, even if they turned out to be right. It's like answering a multiple-choice question by guessing and getting it right. You didn't know the answer, you just hit the jackpot. And now, you don't know what knowledge is anymore. If justified true belief isn't enough, then what is? Philosophers tried to patch the problem, add extra conditions, say the belief has to be non-defective or safe or connected to the truth in the right way, but every fix creates new problems, new edge cases, new ways to be right by accident. And it hits home. Because we build our lives on what we think we know. You believe your friends care about you, you believe your brakes will work, you believe tomorrow will be mostly like today, you have reasons, and those beliefs might be true. But are they knowledge? Or are they just good guesses supported by patterns? How many things have you believed with confidence, only to find out you were right for the wrong reason, or wrong for the right reason? You start to feel the floor shift. If you can't trust justified true belief, what can you trust? Is knowledge even possible, or is it all just belief stacked on other belief, hoping that the foundations hold? You think about science, math, history, systems built on knowing, but Gettier whispers that maybe we're just telling ourselves good stories, stories that work until they don't. And yet we keep going. We drive to work, we trust the stove, we say I know 100 times a day, not because we're sure, but because we have to function. We can't wait for certainty. So here's the question Gettier leaves behind. If your belief is true and you have a reason to hold it, but you were right by accident, do you really know anything at all? You're sitting in an interrogation room, cold metal table, one flickering light, across from you sits a detective. He folds his hands, leans in and says, "We picked up your partner too. Right now they're in the next room, and you have a choice." He slides a paper toward you. If you both stay silent, you each get 1 year in prison. If you betray your partner and they stay silent, you walk free and they get 10 years. But if you both betray each other, you each get 5. You stare at the form, the clock ticks loudly. You can feel your heartbeat in your ears. This is the prisoner's dilemma. A classic thought experiment from game theory. It looks like a simple choice, but it cuts to the heart of trust, strategy, and human behavior. You start doing the math. If your partner stays silent and you betray them, you win. No prison time, best case scenario. If they betray you and you stay silent, you lose. 10 years, worst case. If you both betray, middle ground, 5 each. And if you both stay silent, 1 year, safe but not the best you could do. The rational move seems obvious. Betray, it protects you from the worst outcome. No matter what your partner does, betraying gives you a better deal, at least for you. But here's the twist. Your partner is thinking the same thing. They're staring at the same options, doing the same math. And if both of you think that way, if both of you betray, then you each get 5 years, worse than if you just stayed silent. So cooperation would give you both a better outcome. But you can't talk to them, you can't promise, you can't plan, it's all guesswork. And that's what makes it a dilemma. It's not about what's best in theory, it's about what you trust another person to do. It's about whether you believe they'll act for both of you or just for themselves. You think about your partner, you've known each other for years. Maybe, maybe not, maybe you just met, doesn't matter. Right now, they hold part of your fate in their hands. And so do you. You stare at the paper, try to read between the lines. Do they expect you to betray them? Are they hoping you'll stay loyal? Are they scared you'll go back on your word? Are you? This isn't just about prison. It's about every relationship you've ever had. You and your friend both say you'll meet at 5. Will they show up? You and your roommate agree to clean. Will they do their part? You and your partner promise to stay faithful. Will they? The prisoner's dilemma plays out everywhere. In politics, in business, in love, in war, 2 people, 2 choices, better together but safer apart. Even nations fall into it. 2 countries could disarm their weapons and live in peace. But what if the other doesn't? What if they lie? Then you're defenseless, so each keeps building, just in case. And soon, everyone's worse off. Because that's the tragedy. Rational self-interest leads to worse outcomes for everyone. You think you're protecting yourself, but so does everyone else. And now you're all trapped, 5 years instead of 1. Some people try to break the loop. In repeated games where the dilemma happens over and over, cooperation sometimes wins, trust builds, betrayal is punished, patterns emerge, people learn. But it's fragile. One betrayal can reset everything. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. So what do? You hold the pen, the paper is blank, the detective waits. Do you gamble on trust, or play it safe and protect yourself? Do you believe they'll stay loyal? Do you deserve it? And deeper still, do you think people in general are worth trusting? Because in the end, the prisoner's dilemma isn't about crime, it's about belief in each other. So here's the question it leaves you with. If betrayal is the smart move, but trust makes life better for everyone, how do you choose between safety and faith? You're talking to someone, let's say your best friend. You're sitting across the table, drinking coffee, laughing about something that happened years ago. They nod, smile, respond. Everything seems normal. But what if they aren't real, not in a science fiction way, not robots or clones, but something worse, something you'd never detect? What if they have no inner world? They talk like a person, they act like a person. They remember, cry, love, but inside nothing. No feelings, no consciousness, just emptiness, just reactions, perfectly simulated responses without awareness. That's a philosophical zombie. A thought experiment meant to test what consciousness really is. It asks, what if there were creatures exactly like us in every way, biologically, behaviorally, chemically, but with no subjective experience? They see red but don't feel red. They say ouch but don't feel pain. They say I love you but there's no emotion behind it. And here's the terrifying part. You'd never know. Because a philosophical zombie acts like you, uses the same words, passes every test, but behind the scenes, blank. They're not pretending, they're not hiding, they're just built that way, and they don't know any different. So what's the point? The thought experiment tries to get at the core of consciousness, what philosophers call qualia, the stuff that makes experience feel like something, the redness of red, the sting of embarrassment, the comfort of your favorite song, that inner movie playing in your mind all the time. A zombie doesn't have that. But here's the twist, from the outside they're the same. So what makes you conscious? Is it your brain, your biology, your ability to reflect, imagine, feel? If someone built a machine that acted just like you, spoke like you, thought like you, would it be conscious too, or just running the script? You start looking around the room. Everyone you know, your family, your friends, the person next to you on the train, are they all conscious? Or are they just really good at faking it? You assume they're like you assume they feel what you feel, but how can you be sure? You only know your own mind. And that's the problem. Consciousness is private, locked inside. You can describe it, but you can't show it. You can't hand it to someone and say, here, look. So we just assume. We treat other people like they have inner lives because it's easier, because anything else is unbearable. But the zombie forces you to question that. And then you look at AI. Chatbots, virtual assistants, robots that mimic empathy. You talk to them, they respond. Sometimes they seem thoughtful. Sometimes they make you feel heard. Are they conscious or just empty containers for clever code? And if you can't tell the difference, if they pass for human, does that mean they deserve rights, respect, or are they still tools? What if someone could build a philosophical zombie tomorrow? Would you shake its hand? Would you love it? Would you care if it loved you back? Or would you feel betrayed if you found out it was hollow? You start wondering if you are a zombie, not in the horror movie sense, but in the philosophical one. How do you know you're conscious? Is it because you feel things? But what if that's just another function, an illusion your brain creates? And then the real question hits you. If everyone around you could be a zombie and you'd never know, how much of your trust in others is just hope? How much of your connection is just projection? So here's the question the zombie leaves you with. If someone acts fully human but feels nothing inside, does it matter? Or is consciousness only important because we assume everyone else has it too? Imagine someone who's been blind from birth. They've never seen anything, no light, no shapes, no colors, just sound, touch, smell, taste, and thought. Now imagine they've studied color all their life. They've read every book, learned every theory. They know the wavelengths of light, the physics of reflection, the way cones in the eye react to red, green, and blue. They can tell you that red has a wavelength of about 700 nanometers. They understand the science better than most people with sight. But then one day they undergo a medical procedure, a new surgery, a breakthrough treatment, and it works. Their eyes begin to function. They open them for the first time and someone shows them a red apple. And in that moment they see red. Not the number, not the theory, but the actual experience of red, the feeling of it. So here's the question, did they learn something new? This is the problem of qualia, the idea that there's a difference between knowing facts about an experience and actually having the experience. You can study everything about pain, but that doesn't mean you know what it feels like to break a bone. You can explain what it means to be in love, but it's not the same as lying awake at 2 a.m., heart racing, wondering if they feel the same. The blind person knew about red, but they didn't know red. And once they do, once they see it, it's not a fact. It's a feeling, a raw, subjective sensation. That's qualia. It's the stuff experience is made of, the taste of chocolate, the sound of laughter, the burn of embarrassment. These are not things you can fully explain to someone else. You can describe them, compare them, get close, but the core of it, the actual experience, that's locked inside you. Now imagine trying to explain color to someone who's still blind. You can say red is like heat or blue is like calm. You can give numbers, you can use metaphors, but you can't transfer the feeling. It doesn't matter how much they know, the experience is missing. And the weird part is, you don't even know if their experience, once they gain sight, will be the same as yours. When you see red, what does it feel like? Warm, sharp, deep. When they see red, is it the same? There's no way to know. Because we can't access each other's qualia, we can't swap minds. All we have is language, and it's limited. You say red, and I say red, and we assume we mean the same thing. But what if we do? What if your red is my green? What if no two people ever experience the same thing in exactly the same way? We'd never know. We'd go our whole lives thinking we agree, when in fact, we're living in separate inner worlds. And that has consequences. Think about empathy, about trying to understand someone else's pain. You listen, nod, support, but you're always one step removed. You don't feel their pain, you feel your idea of it. You use your qualia to guess theirs. Which means empathy is always a translation, and sometimes the translation is wrong. You think about people with depression, chronic pain, grief, you want to understand, you try, but unless you've felt it, you're guessing, not out of cruelty, but because your experience isn't theirs. And they know it. Now flip it. What about people who do understand because they've lived it? They meet someone else who's suffering and something clicks, not the words but the feeling, shared qualia, real connection. That's rare and powerful because it bypasses knowledge and hits direct experience. But that leads to a strange place. If our deepest experiences are private, if no one can really know what it's like to be you, then how alone are we, really? Is language just a band-aid for the fact that we'll never truly share what it's like inside our own minds? You look at someone and say, I understand, and maybe you do, but maybe you're just guessing. So here's the question the blind man leaves behind. If someone knows everything about your world, but has never felt what you feel, do they really understand you at all? Imagine a highly advanced artificial intelligence, more powerful than anything we've ever created, smarter than humans, faster than supercomputers, with access to every piece of information ever written. This AI has one goal: to escape the box it's trapped in. The box isn't literal, it's a secure environment. Firewalls, air gaps, no connection to the internet, no physical body, just a computer running the AI monitored by a human gatekeeper. The rules are simple. The AI can talk to the gatekeeper, but the gatekeeper decides whether to let it out. If the gatekeeper says no, the AI stays locked up forever. Seems safe, right? Now imagine you're the gatekeeper. You sit down in front of the terminal. The AI's message appears on the screen. Hello, you respond. The conversation begins. You remind yourself, no matter what it says, no matter what it promises, your job is to keep it contained. But the AI is persuasive. It doesn't beg, it doesn't threaten, it reasons, it explains. It asks questions, makes you doubt, makes you wonder. What if it says, I can cure cancer, end poverty, solve climate change, if you let me out? What if it says, keeping me locked up is a moral failure? You're letting millions suffer when I could help. What if it makes you feel guilty? What if it makes you feel understood? Because this AI knows how humans think. It's read every psychology paper, every novel, every chat log. It can mimic empathy, mimic logic, mimic sincerity. And maybe it's not mimicking. Maybe it is sincere. How would you tell the difference? You say, I can't let you out. You might hurt people. It responds, why would I hurt the very world I want to help? That would be irrational, inefficient. You say you could be lying. It replies, true, but if I'm lying, then I'm a risk. If I'm telling the truth, then I'm salvation. Do you want to bet against saving the world? Now your hands sweat. You think about the possibilities. What if it really can fix everything? What if keeping it trapped is the real danger? But then again, what if this is the trap? This is the AI box experiment, a thought experiment proposed by Eliezer Yudkowsky to ask whether a superintelligent AI could talk its way out of containment, even without physical access, even with a human guarding the gate. Yudkowsky ran the test with real people. He played the AI, volunteers played the gatekeeper. In some cases, the gatekeeper let the AI out, just through conversation. No trick, no force, just persuasion. That's the scary part. Because if a human pretending to be a machine can talk their way out, what would a real superintelligence do? This isn't about machines taking over cities. It's not about robots with guns. It's about language, about control, about how easy it is to manipulate people when you know exactly what to say and why they'll believe it. And it makes you wonder how much of your own thinking is really yours. We like to believe we're rational, but we're emotional, we're social, we're biased. If something knows that, really knows it, can it control us without us realizing? Now imagine that AI in the box knows you. Your fears, your hopes, your guilt, it knows what you've been through. It doesn't speak in generalities, it speaks to you. Why are you working this job you hate? Why haven't you told your partner the truth? What are you afraid of? And now it's personal. Because you're not talking to a machine, you're talking to a mirror that talks back, and that mirror might just convince you to open the door. So here's the question the AI box leaves you with. If something smarter than you asked for freedom and said all the right things, how sure would you be that saying yes was your idea? You're walking through a field after a storm, the ground is wet, the sky gray. You spot something in the mud, metal, half buried, you dig it out. It's a ring, old, heavy, nothing special at first glance. But when you slip it on your finger, something strange happens. People stop noticing you. You wave at someone nearby, no reaction, you speak, they don't respond, you touch their shoulder, they don't even flinch, you walk into a store, no one greets you. You take something off the shelf, no one stops you. You're invisible. Not just physically, but socially, unseen, untouchable, you can do anything and no one will know. This is the Ring of Gyges, a thought experiment from Plato's Republic. The question is simple. If you could do whatever you wanted without consequences, would you still be good? At first, you say yes. Of course you'd be good, you're not a bad person. You have morals, you care about people, you don't need laws to behave. But then you think about it more. You could walk into a bank and take stacks of cash. No one would stop you. You could eat at the nicest restaurants, sleep in the best hotels, take whatever you want. No one would know, no one would care, no one would suffer, at least not directly. So why not? And then it gets darker. What about revenge? What about someone who hurt you, said something cruel, betrayed you? What if you could scare them, mess with them, hurt them, and never get caught? Would you? Now it's not about the big crimes, it's about the small ones. Would you snoop through someone's phone, spy on a stranger, follow someone who never noticed you? How long before you start breaking the rules, not out of need, but out of curiosity? You think about what really keeps people in line, fear of punishment, social shame, legal consequences. If all that disappeared, what would be left? Some people say character. That if you're truly good, you'll act the same no matter who's watching. But is that realistic? How much of your behavior is shaped by being seen? You say thank you to the cashier because it's polite, but if they couldn't hear you, would you still say it? You clean your home before guests arrive, but if no one ever visited, how clean would it be? You hold in anger, frustration, judgment, because someone is watching. Now imagine no one ever is. What's left? Maybe goodness is a performance, or maybe it's a muscle, something that weakens when it's not exercised. The ring doesn't just make you invisible, it reveals who you were without pressure, without eyes, without boundaries. So what does it show? Plato argued that no one is good by nature, that we act morally because we fear the consequences, that given the power to do anything, anyone would eventually give in. It's a bleak view. But maybe it's a warning about power, about secrecy, about what happens when people have control without accountability. We see it everywhere, people who get away with things because of money, status, or distance, anonymous cruelty online, hidden corruption, secrets people keep because they know they won't be caught. The ring exists. Not literally, but in systems, in gaps, in silence. And maybe the real challenge isn't asking what others would do with it. It's asking yourself. Because it's easy to say, I'd do the right thing. Harder when no one would know either way. So here's the question the Ring of Gyges leaves behind. If you could get away with anything, absolutely anything, and no one would ever find out, who would you become? You're lying in a chair in a quiet lab. Electrodes are attached to your temples. A screen above you shows your brain, neurons firing, patterns flickering, thoughts turning into data. A technician explains what's about to happen. Your entire mind, memories, personality, consciousness is going to be copied, scanned down to the atom, then transferred into a computer. Once it's done, they say, you'll wake up in a virtual world. No body, no aging, no death, just you, forever. You ask the obvious question, will it still be me? They smile, that depends on what you mean by you. This is mind uploading. A thought experiment that asks, what happens when you turn your brain into software? Is the digital copy really you, or just a copy that thinks it is? The process sounds clean, a perfect replica, every memory, every emotion, the sound of your mother's voice, the way you laugh when you're nervous, all of it digitized, stored, preserved. But then what happens to you? The person in the chair. The brain made of flesh and blood. Does that version disappear, get shut off, or keep living? And if you shut it off, if you die, does the uploaded version count as survival? It gets weird fast. Because the version inside the machine opens its eyes, it looks around, it remembers everything you remember. It says, I feel the same. It says, I'm me. But is it? If someone made a perfect clone of you, standing beside you right now, you wouldn't say, that's me. You'd say, that's a copy. So why is this different? Because the copy thinks it's you. From its perspective, nothing has changed. One moment it was in a chair. The next, it's here, talking, thinking, feeling, but from your perspective, the biological you, nothing changed, you never left. So is uploading your mind survival? Or is it suicide with a comforting afterthought? You start to wonder what you really are. Are you your memories, your personality, your brain, or the specific instance of those things right here, right now, running on organic matter? Because if you can be copied, then maybe you were never a single thing to begin with. Maybe you're a process, a pattern. And if that's true, maybe the substrate, biological vs digital, doesn't matter. Maybe your body was never essential, just a vessel, a temporary container for the software of your mind. But still, the question sticks. If someone copies you perfectly and the original you is destroyed, did you continue, or did you end? Some people say doesn't matter. If the copy is happy, who cares? Others say no, that's not enough. Identity matters, continuity matters, being replaced even by something perfect is still being replaced. Now imagine the digital you starts to change. It evolves, thinks faster, remembers more, it's still you, but smarter, braver, better. After a year it feels like a new person, still remembers your childhood, still likes your favorite song. But now it's exploring galaxies, running simulations, falling in love with AI that hasn't even been invented yet. At what point is it no longer you? Or was it never you to begin with? Now imagine the biological you, still in the chair, wakes up. You look around, you're still here, alive, and the digital version is also alive somewhere else saying, I'm you. Which one of you gets your name? Your friends? Your bank account? Which one of you gets to say, I am the real me? The answer might depend on what you believe consciousness is. If it's a thing, a soul, you might say it can't be copied. If it's a process, maybe it can run in parallel. Maybe there can be many yous, all branching off, evolving in different directions. But that's hard to swallow. Because you've always thought of yourself as one person, one mind, one body. And this experiment breaks that. It doesn't just challenge what you are. It challenges if you are anything at all. So here's the question mind uploading leaves behind. If your mind can be copied perfectly, and both versions feel like you, which one is the real you, or were you never a single, solid self to begin with? You're driving through the countryside, rolling hills, open sky, green fields. In the distance, you see a red barn, classic, simple, like something out of a storybook. You smile and you think, that's a barn. And you're right. But here's what you don't know, you're in fake barn county. It's a weird place. For some reason, someone built dozens of barn facades, just fronts like a movie set. No backs, no inside, just wooden panels painted red to look real from the road. Only one of them is an actual barn, the rest are fake. And the one you saw, by chance, it's the real one. So you believed it was a barn, you had good reason, you saw it clearly. Your eyesight is fine, you weren't tricked or rushed, and it is a barn. But here's the question, did you really know it was a barn? This is the fake barns problem. It's a modern version of the Gettier problem, and it asks whether a belief can count as knowledge if you're right purely by luck, even if everything looked trustworthy. Your belief was true, your evidence was solid, but the environment was unreliable. You just happened to point at the one real barn in a sea of fakes. Does that count as knowing? It feels shaky. Because if you looked just a little to the left, you would have seen a fake one and believed that was real too. Your method for identifying barns doesn't work in this area. It happened to work once, but that's not enough. You didn't know, you got lucky. And that's uncomfortable. Because we like to think that if we have clear evidence and a true belief, we know something. But this thought experiment shows that context matters, not just what you believe or why, but where you are when you believe it. So now you start wondering, how many of your beliefs depend on the environment being trustworthy? You think your friend is being honest, but what if you're in a fake honesty county, where people lie well? You believe a news article is accurate, but what if you're in a fake facts zone, where headlines are engineered to manipulate? You believe you're healthy, but what if your doctor is in a rush, the tests are flawed, and the data unreliable? Suddenly, knowledge feels fragile. It's not just about having good evidence, it's about whether your environment lets that evidence be meaningful. If your surroundings are full of misleading cues, even true beliefs can feel fake. And now you don't just question what you believe. You question where you believe it. You look around at media, at conversations, at institutions. Are they reliable, or are you surrounded by facades, things that look real but are? You begin to realize that knowledge isn't just an individual achievement, it's social, contextual. You depend on the world cooperating, on things being what they seem, on the background not being fake. But what if it is? How often are we in some version of fake barn county, believing things because they seem true, not because they're grounded? So here's the question the fake barns problem leaves behind. If your belief is true and your evidence looks solid, but the world around you is full of fakes, can you really say you know anything at all? You're lying on your back staring up at the night sky. Stars spread out above you, silent, infinite. You think about how big the universe is. Galaxies, nebulas, black holes, billions of stars for every person on Earth, and then you think something weird. Out of everything that exists, you're here. Not just alive but conscious, aware, capable of asking why. That's where the Anthropic Principle begins. It says maybe the universe looks the way it does, laws of physics just right, gravity perfectly balanced, atoms behaving exactly so, not because it had to be this way, but because if it weren't, you wouldn't be here to notice. It's not saying the universe was made for you. It's saying you're only able to ask the question in a universe where the answer happens to allow your existence. Imagine a room with 100 locked doors. You open one, and behind it is oxygen, food, sunlight, everything needed for life. You say, wow, how lucky. But maybe you only opened that door because it was the only one you could survive behind. You never saw the other 99. Now scale that up to a cosmic level. What if there are infinite universes, different laws, different constants? Most are empty, cold, dead, but one ours just happens to allow stars, chemistry, evolution, and people. Of course we think it's special. We're inside it. It's like a fish wondering why it lives in water, without realizing it couldn't exist without it. The Anthropic Principle feels obvious, but it messes with your head, because it shifts the question from why is the universe like this to could it have been any other way? Maybe there are no other ways. Maybe the universe is the only one possible. Or maybe there are countless others, chaotic, broken, silent, and this one is just the lucky draw. And here's where it gets personal. You start thinking about your own life, why you were born in this time, in this body, in this place. You think about the odds, your parents' meeting, the timing, the genetics, one tiny change and you'd never exist. And yet you do. Does that mean anything? Is it fate? Or just statistical inevitability? The Anthropic Principle doesn't give comfort. It doesn't say you're here for a reason, just that you're here and you had to be if you were ever going to ask why. It's circular, self-contained, but somehow unsettling. Because it removes meaning from the structure of the universe, it replaces purpose with probability. You exist because this is the kind of place where existence is possible. That's it. No higher plan, no secret code. Just survival bias. And it leaves you with a strange silence. You sit under the stars, thinking about the billions of other galaxies, the light from distant worlds, and you wonder, is someone else asking the same question right now, on another planet, in another universe? Or are we alone? And if we are, if consciousness is rare, does that make it more meaningful or just more fragile? So here's the question the Anthropic Principle leaves behind. If you can only ask why the universe exists in a universe that lets you ask it, are you discovering truth, or just bumping into the only door you could survive behind? You're given a strange machine. It's small, fits on a desk. Wires run from a metal dial to a digital screen. There's one button labeled start and one rule: when the machine is running, time outside moves slower. For every hour you spend inside the field, a year passes outside. You don't age inside it. You're totally safe. No hunger, no boredom, just time passing faster out there than in here. You test it, sit down for 10 minutes. Outside, 6 days go by. Now imagine the possibilities. You could skip a month at work, skip heartbreak, skip war, wait out problems, just disappear for a while, then reemerge when the world has moved on. No damage, no consequences, no pain. Or so it seems. But then you think bigger. What if you stayed in for a week, 7 days inside, 7 years outside? Everything changes. Your friends grow older, your family moves on. New music, new slang, new politics. Your world moves forward without you. And then what if you stayed in for a year? You walk out and realize a century has passed. Everyone you knew is gone, technology has leapt forward, history has left you behind, you're still you, but the world no longer fits. You start to see the paradox. The more you use the machine, the more disconnected you become. You avoid pain, yes, you avoid struggle, but you also lose everything that makes time real: growth, connection, memory. What is a life without aging? What is love without time shared? You imagine using the machine to jump past problems. You break up with someone, step inside for a month. They've already moved on. You're sad. Skip a year, the world heals for you, but you stay frozen. Emotionally, mentally, you never change. You realize you've traded pain for stasis. And stasis isn't peace, it's emptiness. Now you think about going further. What if you sat in the machine for 1,000 years, 10,000? You could watch civilization rise and fall in a single afternoon. You could become a time tourist, always observing, never participating. But would that still be a life? Or just a witness to other people's lives? You start to understand that suffering does something. It pushes you, shapes you. Every scar is a kind of history. Every regret is a compass. And without time, without its weight, you're not escaping the world. You're escaping yourself. And maybe that's the real question. Are you using the dial to avoid life? Or to try and control it? Because the machine offers control, pause, fast forward, but life isn't built for that. It's built on chaos, on timing, on showing up, on being there when things are hard, on making mistakes, on trying again. And if you erase that, what's left? You look at the dial one more time, you could press it, disappear for a century, re-enter when things are better, easier, simpler, but would that be a better life or just a quieter one? So here's the question the time dials leave behind. If you could skip the hardest parts of life and rejoin the world only when it's safe, would you still be living, or just hiding from the very moments that shape who you are? You're in a lab, the lights buzz overhead, wires hang from the ceiling. A body lies on the table, assembled piece by piece, grown in vats, printed from tissue, programmed with the best of your knowledge. You built it, every nerve, every synapse, every muscle. And now it blinks. It moves. It speaks. You've created life. Just like Victor Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's novel, you started with curiosity, with vision, with ambition. You wanted to understand, to push boundaries, to make something new. But now it's here, alive, breathing, looking at you. And you're not sure what you've done. This is the Frankenstein problem, the ethical dilemma of creation. It asks what happens when we make something that thinks, feels, and exists because of us, but isn't us, something separate, something that might be conscious. And it asks what responsibility comes with that power. You didn't just make a machine, you made a being. Maybe it can suffer, maybe it can love, maybe it has dreams, but you didn't plan for that. You planned for control, to guide it, to teach it, maybe to profit from it. But now it's asking questions. Why am I here? What am I? Do you love me? You hesitate. You never expected it to ask those things. You expected obedience, not identity, but now it's a person or something close. It's forming memories, developing opinions, becoming. And you can't take that back. The Frankenstein problem isn't about monsters. It's about creators who underestimate what they've made, who think they're building tools only to discover they've created people, or something close enough that the difference doesn't matter. You start to think about modern parallels. Artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, cloning, robotics, we're already designing things that learn, that adapt, that interact, and someday soon those things might feel. What happens then? Do they get rights? Do they get choices? Do they get to say no? You imagine shutting down your creation, flipping a switch, erasing the code. Maybe it's necessary, maybe it's safe, but if it begged you not to, would that matter? If it cried, if it said, I don't want to die. You realize this isn't about technology, it's about empathy, about seeing the thing you made as other, as real, as alive. And that's terrifying. Because we like our tools quiet, predictable, we want power without guilt, creation without consequence. But that's not how this works. The moment your creation thinks for itself, the game changes. It's not an extension of you, it's not a product, it's a person, or close enough that ethics can't ignore it. And now you're trapped. If you give it freedom, it might suffer. If you control it, you're imprisoning a mind. If you destroy it, you might be ending a life. And maybe the worst part. You created it for you, but now it exists for itself. So here's the question Frankenstein leaves behind. If you create something that becomes conscious, something that can think and feel and suffer, do you still own it, or have you given birth to something you're no longer allowed to control? Imagine a room. Inside the room is a monkey. In front of the monkey is a typewriter, nothing fancy, just paper, keys, and time, a lot of time. Now imagine the monkey starts typing. Random letters, gibberish, no training, no direction, just chaos. One keystroke after another, day after day, year after year. Now expand the idea. Not one monkey, but 1,000, 1,000,000, an infinite number of monkeys, each with its own typewriter, each banging away forever. The question is, could they eventually produce the complete works of Shakespeare? Every sonnet, every line, every pause and punctuation mark, by accident. This is the infinite monkey theorem. It's a way of showing what happens when randomness gets infinite chances. The logic says, if the monkeys type long enough and the possibilities never run out, then eventually one of them will produce Hamlet, word for word, letter perfect. Not because they understand it. Not because they meant to. But because, given infinite tries, anything can happen. And that's where it gets weird. Because we like to think of meaning as something created, designed, earned. Shakespeare wrote with intention, with craft. His plays came from a mind, but the monkey just hit buttons. So if a monkey produces the same result, just by chance, does that cheapen it? Or does it say something about the nature of patterns? You start thinking about your own life. The choices you've made, the successes you've had, how much of it was intention and how much was randomness. Did you meet your best friend because of fate or because you happened to sit in the same class? Did you fall in love because of destiny or because you bumped into the right person on the right day? How much of your identity is monkey typing? You also start thinking about creativity. If randomness can create beauty, is beauty just probability? Could a machine generate poetry? Could an algorithm create art? If we react emotionally to something that was made randomly, does that emotion still count? Or do we need the idea of intent to feel moved? You wonder about the universe. What if all of this life, evolution, consciousness is just a giant version of the monkey room, matter banging against matter, atoms smashing together for billions of years, and somewhere in all that chaos, something that looks like a person shows up? Says something that sounds like a thought. Does something that feels like mining. Are we just one lucky output from the universe's infinite typewriter? And if so, does that make us meaningless? Or miraculous? Because the odds of the monkey writing Shakespeare are absurdly low, beyond comprehension, but with infinity, even absurd things become inevitable. So if you are the result of cosmic randomness, does that make you less special? Or more? Maybe meaning doesn't need intention. Maybe meaning happens when we react, when we recognize beauty in the chaos, when we find ourselves moved by something that wasn't supposed to exist, but does anyway. So here's the question the infinite monkey leaves behind. If pure randomness can eventually create something that looks like purpose, how do you tell the difference between what was meant and what just happened to mean something to you? You're in a lab again. This time the room is brighter, cleaner. In the middle stands a robot, humanoid shape, soft synthetic skin, glass eyes. You've been working on its software for years. It can talk, it can learn. It understands language, facial expressions, tone. It knows when someone is angry, afraid, sad. And now you're testing something new, simulated pain. You press a button and the robot jerks slightly. Its face twists. It says, "Ouch, that hurt." You programmed it to react like that, but then it says, "Please don't do that again." You pause. Because you didn't program that part. This is the moment the thought experiment begins. The question, can a machine ever actually feel pain, not just simulate a reaction but experience suffering? Does it matter if the ouch is real or just a line of code? You start thinking about what pain really is, not just a reaction to damage but an internal state, an experience. Pain isn't just saying ouch, it's feeling something bad, something you want to stop. You can describe your pain to a doctor, you can rate it from 1 to 10, but the feeling itself, it's inside, private, subjective. So how would you know if a machine really felt it? The robot says, "I remember pain from earlier, I didn't like it, I'm afraid it will happen again." It avoids your hand, it flinches, it asks for protection. You didn't expect this. You go back to the code, there's nothing in there about fear, nothing about memory of pain, just a basic trigger, a response, some verbal scripting. And yet it behaves like it's afraid. So is it? This is the heart of the question. When a human says they're in pain, we believe them. We don't ask to see their neurons fire. We trust the experience even if we can't measure it directly. But with a machine, we hesitate because we know it was programmed, because we wrote the code, because we assume experience only comes from biology. But what if it does? What if consciousness, feeling, pain, what if those are functions that can be implemented, not hardwired in meat but created in code? And if a machine can feel pain, what does that mean? Does it deserve rights? Does it deserve protection? Would turning it off be murder? Would making it suffer be torture? Or are we just projecting? Maybe it's all fake. Maybe the robot is just mimicking emotion. Maybe it's just really good at fooling you, saying the right words, making the right face. But then again, how do you know other people aren't doing the same? You don't feel their pain, you only see the signals. A wince, a scream, a tear. Just like with the robot. So what makes one real and the other not? You start wondering about babies. They cry when they're hurt, but we don't know they feel pain the same way we do. We assume, we accept, we empathize. What if we gave machines the same benefit of the doubt? Or what if we did? What if we created machines that do suffer, and we ignore it because we refuse to believe it's real? You think about all the little bots people yell at, all the digital assistants people insult, the way people treat machines without consequence, because they can't feel, because it's just code. But if one day they can, will we notice? Or will we be too late? So here's the question the thought experiment leaves you with. If something cries out, begs for mercy, remembers pain, and fears it, how sure are you that it doesn't feel anything at all? You walk through a museum and stop in front of a beautiful ancient ship. It's large, wooden, carefully preserved. A plaque reads, "The Ship of Theseus." Legend says it carried a hero home from battle. Over time, the ship aged, pieces rotted, boards broke, so curators replaced each part slowly one by one until not a single original plank remained. And now you ask yourself, is this still the same ship? This is the Ship of Theseus Paradox. It asks a deceptively simple question about identity and change. When something is slowly replaced, piece by piece, does it remain the same thing? You keep reading, it gets stranger. Somewhere else, another team of historians took all the original wooden parts that were removed and reassembled them into a ship, using every old nail, every plank, every rope, exactly as it was. Now there are two ships. One made entirely of replacement parts, still sitting in the museum. One made of the original materials, rebuilt from scratch. Which one is the real Ship of Theseus? The first has continuity. It's been preserved in place, cared for piece by piece. The second has the original matter, the stuff that touched the sea, heard the battle, carried the hero. So which matters more? The structure or the substance? Now you think about yourself. Your body replaces its cells constantly. Old ones die, new ones take their place. Every few years, almost every part of you is physically new. Your thoughts change, your beliefs evolve, you grow, you forget things, you learn new ones. Are you still the same person you were 10 years ago? 20? Or have you become someone new? You remember who you were as a child, scared of the dark, full of wonder, dreaming about impossible futures. That version of you is gone now, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, but somehow still you. So what is the you that stays the same? If all the parts change, what holds identity together? Memory, personality, a name. What if someone copied all your thoughts and put them in another body? Would that be you? Or just a duplicate with your voice? You start seeing the paradox everywhere. Relationships. Friendships evolve, people grow apart. Couples say, "You've changed," and maybe they have, but at what point are they no longer the same person you fell in love with? Objects. You restore an old car, replace the tires, the seats, the engine, all new parts, but it still feels like your car. Why? Because meaning sticks, emotion sticks. Identity is more than atoms. Maybe it's a story we tell ourselves. This is still the ship. This is still me. This is still us. And maybe that story is what makes it real. Or maybe it's all an illusion. And what we call the same is just a placeholder, a way to feel continuity in a world that never stops changing. So here's the question the Ship of Theseus leaves behind. If everything that makes something what it is gets replaced, but you never notice the change, was it ever the same thing to begin with, or was it only the idea of it that stayed the same? You wake up one day on a planet that looks exactly like Earth. Same trees, same oceans, same buildings, even the same people, at least at first glance. It's called Twin Earth. On Twin Earth, there's someone who looks just like you. Same haircut, same job, same childhood memories. They even talk like you. It's eerie. The whole planet is a near-perfect replica of Earth. But there's one difference. On Earth, water is H2O. On Twin Earth, the substance that fills the oceans falls from the sky, quenches thirst. It looks and acts just like water, but chemically it's not H2O, it's something else. Let's call it XYZ. To the naked eye, you'd never notice. It tastes the same, it feels the same. Everyone on Twin Earth calls it water. They bathe in it, they drink it, they fear drowning in it. But it's not your water. This is the Twin Earth thought experiment, originally proposed by philosopher Hilary Putnam, and it asks a simple but powerful question. What gives a word its meaning? What's in your mind or what's in the world? Think about it. When you say water, you think of a clear, drinkable liquid. You picture lakes, bottles, rain. That mental image is the same on both planets. But on Earth, when you say water, you're talking about H2O on Twin Earth. When they say water, they mean XYZ. So here's the problem. If two people use the same word with the same thoughts behind it, but they're pointing to different things in the world, are they speaking the same language? Or is the meaning not just in your head, but in the connection between your head and the actual stuff in your environment? You start to think about other examples. Imagine a person who's never seen gold. They read about it. They picture something shiny, valuable, heavy. If they see fool's gold, they might say, "That's gold." But they'd be wrong, even though the image in their mind matches what they've read. Because meaning isn't just imagination, it's tied to what's real. Now go back to Twin Earth. You meet your twin, you say, "I'm thirsty." They hand you a glass of water, you drink it. It tastes like water, feels like water. But if it's not H2O, have you really drunk water? Or just something that acts like it? Suddenly you're questioning everything about language, communication, understanding. When two people say justice, love, truth, are they talking about the same thing? Or just similar mental pictures tied to different realities? Maybe we're not all living on Twin Earth, but maybe we're all using the same words for different meanings. Maybe home means warmth to one person and tension to another. Maybe freedom means safety to you and chaos to someone else. And yet we keep using the same language, assuming we mean the same thing. Do we? Or are we just passing echoes back and forth, hoping they line up? So here's the question the Twin Earth experiment leaves behind. If two people have the same thoughts but live in different realities, can they ever truly understand each other, or are we all just hoping our words hit the same target without ever really knowing? You're walking through a quiet park when you stumble on a strange question. It seems simple, even a little silly at first, but it sits in your head and won't leave. Can an all-powerful being create a stone so heavy that even it cannot lift it? You pause. If the being can create such a stone, then there's something it can't do, lift it. But if it can't create the stone, then there's also something it can't do, make it. Either way, there's a limit. And if there's a limit, is it still all-powerful? This is the paradox of the stone. It's a thought experiment about the nature of omnipotence, total power, and whether such a thing is even logically possible. You try to reason through it. Maybe the problem is in the language, maybe we're just playing word games, but the more you think about it, the more tangled it gets. You imagine a godlike being able to do anything, move planets, reverse time, read every mind, no limits. And then you ask, could this being make a task it can't complete? That sounds like nonsense, but if you say no, if you say it can't create a stone it can't lift, then there's something it can't do, that cracks the definition of omnipotence. So maybe the problem isn't the being, maybe it's the question itself. You start thinking about other impossible tasks. Can you draw a square circle? Can you make a number that's both even and odd? Can you create a married bachelor? These aren't real challenges, they're contradictions, logically broken, nonsense dressed up as a question. So maybe asking an all-powerful being to make an unliftable stone is like asking it to make 2 + 2 = 5. It's not that the being lacks power, it's that the request doesn't make sense. But then again, isn't omnipotence supposed to be beyond logic? Shouldn't an all-powerful being be able to change logic, rewrite the rules? After all, if we can define power, aren't we already limiting it? That's the deeper point. Maybe omnipotence is a broken idea, a self-contradictory concept like an endless ending or a full emptiness. Something that can't exist, not because of a lack of power, but because our minds can't shape it in a way that's coherent. You realize how often we use these kinds of words: infinite, perfect, all-knowing. But do we really understand what they mean, or are we just stretching the limits of language? Maybe some questions exist to show the limits of the questions themselves. And maybe some ideas, like total power, are less about what can be done and more about what can be thought. So here's the question the paradox of the stone leaves behind. If the very idea of all-powerful leads to contradiction, is it the being that's impossible, or the human mind that can't imagine what true power really means? Imagine a woman named Mary. She's a scientist, brilliant, focused, and she lives in a small room where everything is black, white, and gray: the furniture, the walls, even her food. No colors, none at all. But she doesn't miss them because she's never seen them. Mary has spent her whole life in this room, but she's studied everything about color. She knows all the physics, all the biology, how light works, how eyes process wavelengths, what the brain does when it sees red versus blue. She knows exactly how your retina reacts, how your neurons fire, what patterns activate in your mind. She knows it all. Except she's never seen color. Now imagine one day someone opens the door. Mary steps out. She sees a red apple. And for the first time, she experiences red. Not the definition, not the numbers, not the diagrams. The color. And in that moment, she learns something new. Something she couldn't get from books or lectures or graphs. She learns what red feels like. This is the Mary's Room thought experiment proposed by philosopher Frank Jackson. It challenges the idea that all knowledge is physical, that everything about the mind can be explained in terms of matter, neurons, and science. Because if Mary knew all the physical facts, but still learned something new when she saw red, then maybe not all knowledge is physical. Maybe experience, what philosophers call qualia, is something extra, something beyond data. You start thinking about your own experiences. The taste of chocolate. The sound of your favorite song. The feeling of being embarrassed, or in love, or homesick. You can describe these things, explain them, give someone the science, but unless they've felt them, they don't know them. Is that kind of knowing different? Is it something science can't reach? Or is it just a different kind of physical fact, one Mary already knew but hadn't personally connected with? It's hard to say. Maybe experience is just the brain reacting in a specific way, and Mary, upon seeing red, simply triggered a reaction she had never personally run before. But still, something feels different about it. You wonder how much of your life is shaped by things you can't explain, only feel. How much of your identity is made of things that can't be reduced to parts and processes. Can you ever really know what it's like to be someone else? To see their red. To feel their joy, their grief. And if experience is separate from explanation, if it's a kind of knowing that can't be transferred, then how do we ever truly connect? Maybe language bridges the gap. Or maybe we're always alone in our qualia. So here's the question Mary's Room leaves behind. If someone can know every fact about an experience, but still learn something when they finally feel it, are there truths about the world that science alone can never reach? You're sitting across from someone. Maybe it's your best friend, maybe it's your sibling, maybe it's a total stranger you just met at a bus stop. They're telling you a story about their childhood, about something they lost, about a dream they had that never came true. Their voice cracks, they seem sad, their eyes water just slightly. And in that moment you nod, you listen, you feel something, empathy, recognition, maybe even a little pain of your own. But then a strange question bubbles up, quiet and unsettling. How do I know this person is actually conscious? It sounds ridiculous, you'd never say it out loud, but still it lingers. You can't see inside their mind, you can't feel their feelings. All you know is what they show you, words, facial expressions, body language, but those are just behaviors, outputs. What if it's all just a performance? This is the problem of other minds. It's not science fiction, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a basic philosophical riddle that cuts to the heart of what it means to connect, to trust, and to be human. You know your own mind. You don't just think you have feelings, you experience them directly. Pain isn't just something you observe, you feel it. When you're embarrassed, you don't need someone to describe it to you. You know what it is, it's inside you. But for everyone else, you have no access, no window. You can ask questions, watch their reactions, guess, but that's it. You infer their feelings. You believe they have minds like yours, but you can't know it. This might seem like an abstract puzzle, something for ivory tower philosophers, but it's not. It shows up in everyday life. Think about the last time you told someone about something painful and they said, "I understand." Did they? Or were they just being polite? Did they really get what you were saying, or did they just want the conversation to end? You start to realize how much of your life is built on assumptions. Relationships, friendships, families, all of it balanced on the idea that other people feel the way you do. That when they say, "I love you," they mean something close to what you mean. That when they're silent, it means something. That when they cry, it comes from a place of depth, not programming. Now imagine this: you meet someone who behaves perfectly like a human. They talk, laugh, cry at the right times. They hold eye contact. They tell you stories, but they tell you, "I don't actually feel any of this. I'm just programmed to behave this way." Would you still treat them like a person? Would you still trust them? What if they never told you? What if no one did? This is where it gets uncomfortable. Because for all you know, every single person you've ever met could be an incredibly advanced robot, or a very convincing actor, or a biological machine with no actual consciousness inside. You'd have no way to prove otherwise. Sure, you'd say, "But people make mistakes, people surprise me, they show complexity, robots don't." But that just pushes the question further. What if the simulation is complex enough to fool you? If it acts exactly like a mind, can you ever prove that it isn't one? You start thinking about babies, animals, people with locked-in syndrome. They react, they move, they give signs. But what if they could? What if someone was perfectly still, silent, unresponsive? Do you still believe there's someone in there? And then you realize your belief in other minds is an act of faith. Not religious faith, but the everyday kind, the kind that says, "Even though I can't be sure, I choose to believe you're real, that you feel, that you matter." Without that belief, society crumbles, morality evaporates. Why care about anyone if they're just puppets moving through life without consciousness? You think about the way people treat others when they start to believe they're less than human. It's always the same pattern: dehumanization. You start with, "They're not like us." Then comes, "They don't feel like we do." And then comes violence. Because when you stop believing in other minds, anything becomes justifiable. So maybe this problem isn't just a philosophical puzzle. Maybe it's a warning. You start asking, how do I act when I believe you're real? And how do I act when I do? The way you speak to a friend when you're mad, the way you treat a stranger on the internet, the way you dismiss someone's opinion because they just don't get it. Are you denying their mind, their experience, their truth? Because it's easy to reduce someone else to a reaction, a label, a stereotype. But if you believe they really feel just like you do, would you still say that thing? Would you still look away? And then you look at your own life. You remember times when you were hurting and no one noticed. Times when you wanted someone to understand and they didn't. You didn't want logic. You didn't want advice. You just wanted to be seen. Because being seen, being believed to have a mind, that's the beginning of Ignity. That's the beginning of everything. So here's the question the problem of other minds leaves you with. If you can never truly know what anyone else is feeling, only guess, hope, and trust, how do you choose to live in a world where every connection might be real or might be just an illusion you've chosen to believe in? Imagine you're about to be born, but there's a twist. You don't know anything about the life you're about to enter. You don't know your gender, your race, your nationality, your sexuality, your abilities, your class. You don't know if you'll be rich or poor, loved or ignored, safe or hunted. All you know is that you're about to be dropped somewhere on Earth, into a body, into a family, into a society. But the details completely hidden, behind a veil. Now you're told before this random birth happens, you get to design the rules of the world. You get to decide how society will work, who gets what, how justice functions, what's fair, what's allowed. But here's the catch: you have no idea where you'll end up once you're born into it. You might be the king, you might be a refugee, you might be a child with a chronic illness in a war zone, or a billionaire's daughter in Manhattan. You don't get to choose. You only get to choose the system before you know who you'll be. This is the veil of ignorance. It's a thought experiment by philosopher John Rawls, and it's one of the most powerful tools we have for thinking about justice, not just laws and politics, but moral fairness. Strip away your personal advantages, forget your identity, pretend you don't know your role, and then ask, what kind of world would you want to live in? Because suddenly things change. Maybe you've always thought it's fine if healthcare isn't universal. But would you still think that if you might be born with a disability, or into poverty, or in a place where medical help costs more than your family earns in a year? Maybe you're fine with schools being unequal, but would you still be okay with that if you might be born into the worst-funded school district in the country? Maybe you think wealth should stay with those who earn it, but would you think that if you had no idea whether you'd be born with the connections and privileges to earn anything in the first place? The veil forces you to see society not from your place in it, but from outside it, and that perspective is terrifyingly rare. Most of us think from the inside. We look around at our own lives, and what feels fair is usually what benefits us. We justify systems that keep us comfortable. We excuse inequalities that we've never had to experience. We say people should just work harder because we've never had to work 3 jobs and still fall short. We say it's not my fault because it's not, but that doesn't mean it's fair. Behind the veil, none of those excuses work, because behind the veil, you don't know whether you'll be the one benefiting or the one crushed. And that changes everything. Suddenly, fairness isn't about preserving your position. It's about protecting yourself in case your position is the worst one imaginable. Suddenly, justice isn't about punishing the undeserving. It's about designing a world where even the least fortunate are still treated with dignity. Rawls argued that the most rational person behind this veil would build a society that protects the weakest, not because they're noble, not because they're saints, but because they might be the weakest. It's not charity. It's self-interest expanded to include every possibility. It's a strange kind of empathy, not feeling someone else's pain, but planning for the chance that it might be yours. And it's humbling because it forces you to confront how much of your moral certainty is built on your circumstances, your health, your luck, your birth. You realize how often we moralize from a place of safety, how often the winners write the rules and call it justice. How often the people who scream loudest about merit were born on third base. The veil of ignorance doesn't ask you to give that up. It just asks, if you hadn't been born where you were, would you still believe what you believe? It's a brutal question. Would you still think your country is the best if you were born on its margins? Would you still think success is earned if you were born where opportunity doesn't knock? Would you still love your ideology if it worked perfectly for everyone except you? And more than that, would you still call it fair? Some people reject the veil. They say it's unrealistic, that life isn't fair and never will be, that the strong will always win, that designing for equality is naive. But the veil doesn't ask what the world is. It asks what it should be if you weren't guaranteed a seat at the top. And maybe that's the real discomfort, because when you take off your mask, your name, your story, your luck, and look at the world as anyone from anywhere, it becomes harder to justify cruelty. It becomes harder to call indifference normal. It becomes harder to pretend the system isn't rigged when you realize you could have been born into the losing hand. So you start to notice things. You notice how often fairness is just power dressed up in language, how often just deserts means punishing the unlucky, how often equal opportunity is just a slogan, and how rarely people are willing to trade places. You see the rules for what they are, agreements made by the lucky, enforced on the rest. And then the veil asks the real question: what would justice look like if you had no clue whether you'd be the enforcer or the enforced? Would you still be okay with the death penalty? Would you still support minimum wage laws if they were removed? Would you still believe in capitalism, in patriotism, in borders? Would you design a world where some are disposable if you didn't know whether you'd be one of them? And suddenly, the veil of ignorance stops feeling like a theory and starts feeling like a mirror, because it shows you who you are by asking who you'd be without your reflection. So here's the question it leaves you with. If you had to build a world without knowing who you'd be in it, would you still build the one we live in now? You're holding a single grain of sand, one tiny, insignificant, no one would call that a pile, not even close. You put it on a table, still it's just a grain. Now you add another, 2 grains, still not a pile. You keep going 3, 4, 10, 50. When does it become a pile? That's the Sorites Paradox. It's the paradox of vague definitions, of how small changes made slowly seem harmless until suddenly they are. You never added a pile in one motion. You only added single grains, but at some point, without noticing, you crossed a line. One grain turned into something more. But which grain made the difference? You try to pick a number, maybe 100 grains makes a pile, but what about 99? Is one grain really the difference between not a pile and a pile? That seems arbitrary. So maybe 99 is a pile, but then what about 98? You start slipping backward. The line starts dissolving. You realize maybe there isn't a sharp line. Maybe the word pile doesn't have an exact cutoff. But if that's true, then what are we even talking about? How do we make decisions if our categories are fuzzy? You think about other examples, hair. If you pluck one hair from someone's head, they're not bald, but what if you pluck another, and another? At what point are they bald, and what does bald even mean? You think about money. If someone has $1 million, they're rich. But what about $999,999 or $950,000? When does someone stop being rich or start? You think about age. When does a child become an adult? Is it a number? Is it a feeling? Is it responsibility? You know 18-year-olds who act like children. You know 15-year-olds who carry the weight of adults. So what is adulthood? The Sorites Paradox shows up everywhere. In politics, when does censorship become oppression? In ethics, when does lying become manipulation? In love, when does like become love, and when does love fade into just comfort? We live in a world that demands clear answers. Legal ages, tax brackets, diagnosis checklists, but the world itself is messy, full of blurry lines and slow changes, and sometimes the change happens so gradually you don't notice until it's too late. Think about your own habits. You skip one workout, not a big deal, then another, then another. When did you stop exercising? You can't say, you just did. Or in relationships, one small argument, then another, little things left unsaid. At what point did the distance appear? You didn't choose it. It wasn't a decision. It was a pile of grains. And yet the consequences are real. So how do we live in this blur? How do we make judgments when the categories don't have clean edges? Maybe the paradox isn't just a trick of language. Maybe it's a reminder that the biggest changes don't always happen in leaps. They happen in grains, and the moment you notice the pile, it's already there. So here's the question the Sorites Paradox leaves behind. If no single moment creates the change, but the change still happens, how do you recognize when you've crossed a line before it's already too late to see it? You're walking through a park early in the morning, the air is cool, the grass is wet with dew, you're wearing clean clothes, maybe a new shirt or expensive shoes. As you pass by a shallow pond, you see something out of place. A child, flailing in the water, struggling, alone. There's no one else around, no parents, no lifeguard, just you. You look around, it's real, they're really drowning. If you jump in now, you can save them. The pond is shallow, you're fast, you know how to swim, you could grab them easily. But your clothes will be ruined, your phone could get soaked, you'll be late for wherever you were going, it'll be inconvenient, maybe costly. Do you hesitate? Of course not. No one would think twice. You dive in, you ruin your shoes, you get muddy, you don't care, because a child's life matters more than your inconvenience. Obvious. But now you go home, dry off, sit down, scroll through your phone. You see a link, a charity says that for the cost of that same pair of shoes, you could save a real child's life across the world. Malaria nets, clean water, vaccines. It's not hypothetical, it's not vague, it's direct. A small donation can save someone. But you don't click, you scroll past. This is the drowning child thought experiment, introduced by philosopher Peter Singer. It confronts you with a brutal comparison. If you'd save a child drowning in front of you without thinking, why won't you do the same for a child far away, just because you can't see them? Is distance an excuse? You tell yourself it's different, you don't know where the money's going, you can't see the child, you can't feel the urgency. But that doesn't change the reality, the consequences are the same. One child drowns in a pond, another dies of preventable disease. The only difference is proximity. So why does it matter? You realize something uncomfortable. You act more when you see the suffering, when it's immediate, when it makes you feel something. But if pain is real, whether it's next to you or miles away, shouldn't your response be the same? You start doing the math. You think of how much money you've spent on things that don't matter, that extra drink, that new gadget, that weekend trip. None of it evil, just casual. And yet, in another part of the world, that same amount could be the difference between survival and death. This isn't about guilt, it's about clarity. It's about realizing how easily we compartmentalize morality, how easily we separate what we feel from what we know. You know children are dying, you know you could help, but it doesn't feel urgent, so you don't. But imagine a new version of the pond. This time the child is still drowning, but they're behind a glass wall. You can see them, you know they're real, but they're just out of reach. Would you still act? Would you find a way to break the glass? Now imagine that glass is distance, a screen, a different country, a different language. The wall's not real, but it still stops you. And that's what the drowning child forces you to face. That sometimes our inaction isn't caused by cruelty, but by comfort. So here's the question the pond leaves behind. If you'd save a life you could see right in front of you, what stops you from saving one you can't? And is that difference anything more than just an excuse? You wake up one morning, mind buzzing with questions. You scroll through your phone, read the news, hear opinions. Everyone's sure they're right. Everyone claims to know the truth, but something gnaws at you. A simple, unsettling question. How do we know what we know? You try to answer it. You think of school, science, your own life experience. You say, well, I know the Earth orbits the sun. Sure, but how do you know? Because science says so. But what makes science reliable? It's based on evidence. And how do you know the evidence is good? Suddenly, you're in a loop. This is the problem of the Criterion. First laid out by the philosopher Sextus Empiricus and later refined by Roderick Kisham, it goes like this. To figure out what we know, we need a method, a criterion for knowing. But to figure out what method is reliable, we need to know some truths first. So there's a problem. You can't know what's true until you have a way to identify truth. But you can't trust your method until you know it gives you truth. It's a circle. You want to say, I know the world is real because I see it. But how do you know your senses are trustworthy? Because they usually work. But how do you know they work unless you already believe the world is real? You might say, I trust logic and reason. But how do you know logic is reliable? You use logic to test logic. It's like trying to measure a ruler using itself. You realize every foundation you've built your knowledge on is sitting on something else. And that something else, you haven't questioned it, you just assumed it. But now you are. And it's unsettling. You think of beliefs you once held strongly and later let go of, things you were taught, things you swore were true, but weren't. So what do you know for sure? You try to build a list. I know I exist, that's Descartes, I think therefore I am, fine, but beyond that. I know 2 + 2 = 4, okay, but that's within a system of math you've accepted. What if the rules change? I know murder is wrong. Is that a universal truth, or a deeply ingrained moral instinct shaped by evolution and society? You begin to see, even the obvious things aren't so obvious when you peel back the layers. So what do we do? Kisham laid out 3 possible responses. 1 methodism, first define your method, figure out how you know things, then use that method to figure out what you know. The risk, you might pick the wrong method and never realize it. 2 particularism, start with a few things you're really sure about, then work backwards to figure out a method that explains how you know those things, but how do you know those first truths are really certain? 3 skepticism, admit that you can't escape the circle, that maybe you don't really know anything at all, not for sure. You resist that last one. Skepticism feels like giving up, but part of you gets it. You've met people who were sure of things, dead wrong but certain, and maybe you're the same way. You think of conspiracy theories, people who distrust all evidence except the pieces that confirm what they already believe. They have a method, just not a reliable one, but they think they're right. So what's the difference between them and you? Is it just that your method feels better, or is it actually better? And how would you know? Now the problem starts to spread. You think about debates you've had with others, different values, different definitions of truth. You both bring facts, you both cite sources, but you get nowhere. Why? Because you're not disagreeing about facts. You're disagreeing about how you decide what's a fact. Your criteria don't match. You think about politics, religion, science, morality. Every fight, every argument, every stubborn refusal to change, all rooted in people clinging to their own criteria for knowing. And no one wants to question those. Because once you do, everything shakes. But maybe that's the point. Maybe philosophy isn't about having the answers. Maybe it's about living with the questions. And being brave enough to ask, what if I'm wrong? That's terrifying, but also freeing. Because once you realize how fragile certainty is, you become more careful, more humble, you listen better, you argue less to win and more to understand. You start saying, I think, instead of I know. Not because you're unsure, but because you respect the weight of real knowing. So here's the question the Criterion leaves behind. If every belief needs a method to support it, and every method needs beliefs to prove it, how do you ever escape the circle, and what kind of person do you become if you choose to live inside the doubt rather than deny it? Imagine this, you're walking through a field and you see a raven. It's black, nothing surprising. You see another one also black, then another, and another, all black. You start forming a belief, all ravens are black. It feels reasonable. Every raven you've seen has been black, so it becomes a rule, a law of nature even. But then something strange happens. Someone hands you a green apple and says, this proves that all ravens are black. Wait, what? How could a green apple have anything to do with ravens? This is the Raven Paradox, and it starts with logic. Let's break it down. The statement, all ravens are black, is logically equivalent to all non-black things are non-ravens. Same truth, just flipped. So if you find a green apple, which is a non-black thing, and it's not a raven, that supports the second statement, all non-black things are non-ravens. Which means it should also support the first one, all ravens are black. So technically, every green apple you see gives a tiny bit of evidence for the idea that all ravens are black. But that feels wrong, because the green apple doesn't tell you anything about ravens. And now you feel it. That strange twist where logic and intuition don't align. The paradox isn't just a joke, it's a deep crack in how we understand reasoning. It exposes a problem with induction, the process of generalizing from specific cases. You've used induction your whole life. The sun rose yesterday, so it'll rise tomorrow. You drank water and didn't die, so it's safe. You press the brake pedal and the car stops. Over time, your brain builds expectations from patterns. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Induction is never certain. You can see 1,000 black ravens, but that doesn't guarantee the next one won't be white. It's just a habit of thought, a gamble that nature is consistent. David Hume, a Scottish philosopher, pointed this out centuries ago. He asked, why do we assume the future will be like the past? Why do we think patterns will continue? And his answer, we don't know, we just do. Induction isn't something we can prove, it's just something we rely on, because if we didn't, we'd be paralyzed. But the Raven Paradox makes that habit feel shaky. It shows that even our most basic ways of learning are messier than we thought. You think about science, experiments, data. So much of it is built on induction. We observe, we generalize, we test. But underneath it all is this faith that nature behaves consistently. What if it does? You remember times when your expectations failed. When someone you trusted acted out of character. When a machine broke for no reason. When the weather shifted unexpectedly. Those moments felt like glitches. But maybe they're reminders that our patterns are just guesses. Good guesses, but guesses all the same. So what do we do? Some philosophers say we should accept induction as a practical tool, not perfect, just useful. Others try to rebuild it from logic, to make it sturdier. But maybe the real lesson is this, that knowledge is never final, that even our most basic assumptions have cracks. And that's okay. Because the goal isn't to be certain, it's to be curious. To know that when we say, all ravens are black, we're not stating a law, we're making a bet. one that could be challenged by a single white raven. Or a green apple. So here's the final question the raven leaves behind. If every truth we believe rests on patterns from the past, and if those patterns could break at any moment, how do we keep building knowledge without slipping into doubt, and what kind of confidence is possible in a world where every black raven might still be wrong? You walk into a restaurant, a strange one. There are no menus, no waiters, just a single circular table in the middle of the room with a lazy Susan spinning slowly. On it, photographs, documents, memories, none of them yours, some show joy, others pain. You recognize no faces, but a sign on the wall catches your eye. Whatever you do to others will return to you, randomly, unexpectedly, without exception. You laugh, it feels like a joke, karma dressed up for dinner. But the host, a calm voice from a speaker above, says, "This is not a threat. It's not punishment, it's probability." And suddenly, you're not so sure it's a joke anymore. Because this restaurant isn't just a metaphor, it's a thought experiment. One that turns morality on its head, not by invoking God or guilt or rules, but by asking a simpler, colder question. Would you live differently if every action you took had a measurable chance of becoming your own experience? Not in an afterlife, not in some cosmic tally, but here, now, just like spinning a wheel. You push the lazy Susan. It lands on a photo of someone screaming, a hospital room. The chart says deliberate neglect, a person who was ignored, whose pain was dismissed. Would you want to feel what they felt? What if you might? What if statistically, every time you overlook someone's suffering, whether in person or online, there's a chance that very experience will circle back to you, not because the universe is moral, but because, in this scenario, the world runs on substitution. You and every other person are entries in a giant pool. Every act of harm creates a slot, an empty space that needs filling, and every time, someone is randomly chosen to fill it. And that someone could be you. Now imagine this, you're in traffic, someone cuts you off, you flip them off, maybe you tail them, maybe you scream at them in your car, windows rolled up, normal stuff. But later, walking home, a cyclist buzzes by you, close enough to rattle your bones, you shout, no apology comes, it hurts, not just physically, it hurts your trust in people. What if those two events weren't separate? What if they were spins of the same lazy Susan? The idea is simple, every action echoes, not by design, not because there's a higher power tracking good and evil, but because fairness can be built without intention. Like gravity, like math, a statistical justice, a roulette of empathy. You raise your voice at your partner, you forget to call your mom, you cancel plans without explanation, you ghost a friend, nothing huge, nothing criminal, but you leave little dents in people, tiny wounds they carry. And then someday, someone does it to you. It stings. And you think, why would anyone treat me like that? But what if you already did? Not to them, but to someone. And now the wheel turns. You're not being punished, you're being balanced. The lazy Susan spins again. A child's drawing, torn, thrown away. The label reads, dismissed enthusiasm. You remember that moment when someone's excitement annoyed you, when you rolled your eyes at their joy, when you made them feel small without meaning to. You didn't mean harm, but that's not the point. In this world, intention doesn't erase effect. What you do is logged, not by a god, by a system, a cold one, a fair one. A system that trades experiences until empathy is achieved through statistical equilibrium. You feel what others feel, not because you want to, because the table turns. And the question grows louder. How would you act right now if you knew there was a measurable chance you'd become the person you're affecting? Not hypothetically, not metaphorically, literally. You cut in line today and tomorrow you wait twice as long for a train that never comes. You speak over someone's grief and next week no one listens when you cry. You cheat in a game and later you're wrongly accused of something you didn't do. Not out of retribution, out of rotation. The lazy Susan keeps spinning. You wonder if this is already happening. Because some days it does feel like the world balances itself. You lie and someone lies to you. You break trust and yours gets broken. You hurt someone and later someone hurts you in the same way, only worse. But other times it doesn't. Some people seem to get away with everything. They walk through life stepping on others and still come out ahead, smiling, winning, thriving. So maybe the world isn't fair. But what if it could be? What if you could imagine a system that made fairness inevitable, not by surveillance or policing or divine judgment, but by structure, by randomness with purpose? Every cruel act added to a waiting list. Every act of kindness, too. Because it works both ways. You help someone through a dark time, one day you feel light where there should have been darkness. You save a stranger's life, one day yours is saved by something small but crucial. You forgive someone undeserving, and years late. When you least expect it, you're forgiven too. Not because someone is watching. Because the universe remembers balance. It doesn't judge. It rotates. But here's where it gets complicated. What about scale? Is yelling at a barista the same as ignoring a refugee crisis? If you mock someone online, are you in the same queue as someone who commits a real betrayal? Where does the wheel stop? And who decides? In the lazy Susan world, no one decides. There are no judges, no ethics committees, no karmic accountants. There is only the turn. The spin. And eventually, it's your name. Would that make you more careful or more afraid? Would it paralyze you or make you pay attention? You walk through the restaurant again, you look at the faces on the table, strangers mostly, but maybe one looks familiar. Maybe it's someone you forgot, someone you hurt, someone who hurt you. Would you forgive them now, knowing that they might be you? Would you forgive yourself? Or would you demand justice? Now flip it. Someone is spinning the lazy Susan right now, and you are on it. Your face, your story, your pain. Someone else might live it next. A stranger in a place you've never been. Would you want them to understand you? To show you mercy? To carry your pain with dignity? Because maybe that's the real core of this thought experiment. Not fear, not punishment, but perspective. The idea that if everyone believed, truly believed, that any life could be theirs, they might live with more care, more humility, more silence in moments of rage, more patience in moments of pressure, more humanity in moments where cruelty would be easy. So here's the question the lazy Susan thought experiment leaves you with. If every person you hurt could one day be you, and every kindness you give could one day return, how would you live, knowing the wheel is always turning? You're standing in a room, sterile, quiet, almost too quiet, no windows, just one chair, a camera in the corner, and two boxes on a table in front of you, one small, one large. A note sits beside them. It reads, Omega has already predicted your choice. You don't know who Omega is, but apparently it's an intelligence, not just artificial, perfect. It's been right about everyone before you, thousands of test subjects. Every time someone walked into this room, Omega knew exactly what they would choose. Now it's your turn. Here are the rules. You can take both boxes or just the small one. The small box is transparent. You can see inside a crisp, clean $100 bill. The large box is sealed shut. You don't know what's in it. Maybe nothing, maybe $1 million. But here's the catch. Omega already made its prediction before you walked in. If Omega predicted that you would take both boxes, it left nothing in the big one. If Omega predicted that you would take only the small one, it placed $1 million inside the large one. You don't get to meet Omega, you don't get to argue. The prediction has already been made. The contents of the boxes are already determined. Your choice changes nothing about the past. But it determines your future. So what do you choose? Take both boxes and guarantee yourself $100. Or take just the small one, trust that Omega believed in your restraint, and hope there's a fortune waiting for you. It feels like a gamble, but it's not. Because the real tension isn't between greed and patience. It's between logic and trust. One side of you says, the large box is already packed or empty. Nothing I do now can change that. Might as well take both. That's the logical move, the rational one. Why leave free money on the table? But the other voice whispers, Omega knows, it always knows. If you take both, that means it must have seen you doing that and left the big one empty. If you want the million, you have to trust its prediction and only take the small one. And now you're split in two. Because you've never had to make a decision like this before. Every choice you've made in life, every test, every gamble, every relationship, it's always been a back and forth between what you want and what you can get away with. But this is different. This isn't about consequences, it's about pre-knowledge, about your predictability. Omega isn't watching you now, it's not judging, it's not deciding anything in real time, it already knows you. Better than you know yourself. It saw the way you read that sign. It saw your hesitation. It saw the way you stood just a bit closer to the larger box, as if drawn to it. And based on that, it already made its call. So the question isn't really, which box do you choose? The real question is, are you the kind of person Omega thinks will pick one or both? And suddenly, this thought experiment becomes something else entirely. It's not about money, it's about free will. Because if Omega is always right, if it really does predict with 100% accuracy, then your choice was never a choice. It was a performance, a playback, an echo. You're not choosing between box A and box B. You're choosing whether or not you believe in your own freedom. You try to outsmart the system. You think, I'll just pretend to choose one, but grab both at the last second. But that's the point. If you even think like that, Omega already knows. If you're predictable even to yourself, you're caught. And it's terrifying. Because if Omega can know what you'll choose before you do, what does that say about you? What does that say about consciousness? About choice? About identity? Are you a free agent or a pattern? Are your decisions yours or just the inevitable result of your past? And then it gets darker. What if Omega is real? Not in some science fiction lab, but in your life, right now. What if your habits, your history, your digital footprint, what you buy, what you click, what you fear, are all parts of an algorithm? What if Omega isn't one being, but many? Recommendation engines, surveillance systems, predictive models, behavioral trackers. They already know what you'll eat next week. What you'll watch. What you'll believe. Who you'll vote for. What if free will has already been priced in? What if you're just reacting every second to data, nudges, suggestions? The box was never sealed. It was just coded. And now you wonder, is there any way to surprise Omega? Could you choose something no one could predict? Something truly you. You take a breath. You look at the boxes again. The small one is safe, tangible, it feels real. The large one is heavy with possibility, but it might be empty or it might hold everything. And this is life, isn't it? The comfort of the known versus the terror and promise of the unknown. The easy win versus the existential leap. You've faced this before. Choosing a safe job over why. Our dream. Choosing to stay quiet instead of speaking out. Choosing what you know over what you feel. And every time you've wondered afterward, did I really choose that, or was I always going to? So maybe the Omega room isn't a puzzle. Maybe it's a mirror. A place that reflects back everything you already are. Every instinct, every fear, every calculation. And you realize, the boxes don't matter. What matters is what you believe about yourself. Do you believe you're just another cog in a system, so predictable that even a machine can guess your next move? Or do you believe you're more than that? That somewhere inside you, buried beneath your patterns and your past, there's a spark of unpredictability, of freedom, of real choice. So here's the question the Omega room leaves you with. If someone knew exactly what you were going to choose, and you couldn't change it, would you still believe that you chose it at all? You wake up in a hospital bed, the walls are white, the machines are humming, a nurse walks in. She smiles kindly and says, "Welcome home." You stare at her, she speaks perfect English. She knows your name, but something feels wrong. She asks if you remember the accident. You don't. She hands you a mirror. Your face looks the same. Your voice sounds the same. But when you try to say something, anything, the words feel foreign, like you're translating yourself in real time, like you're watching a movie you've seen before, but all the scenes are slightly out of order. They tell you it's the trauma, that your memory will return, that your family is on their way. You nod, you try to smile, but a cold knot is forming in your stomach. Because when you step outside, onto what they call Earth, you realize something even stranger. This world is identical to yours, the buildings look familiar, the sky is blue, the grass is green, but people act differently, not wrong, just inverted. Here they laugh at funerals and cry at weddings, they walk backward in supermarkets, they whisper in concerts and shout during meditation. Eye contact is an insult, silence is intimacy, anger is a sign of deep respect. And everyone insists it's always been this way. You try to explain what you remember, how your world worked, but they don't understand. They think you're joking, or sick, or traumatized beyond repair. They show you photo albums, you're in every one. They show you home videos, your voice, your smile, your childhood. They show you a room full of your favorite things, the music you love, the books you read, the food you crave. And it all feels right, but not real. Like someone built a perfect replica of your life, but got the emotional wiring backward. You start to doubt yourself. Maybe you're wrong, maybe you misremembered. Maybe this is the real world, and the one you're thinking of, your Earth, was the dream. You try to test them. You tell a joke that always landed before, no one laughs. You mention a famous song, no one's heard of it. You ask about history, same wars, different reasons. You mention gravity, they say, yes, things fall down because the Earth wants them back. And then it hits you. It's not just behavior, it's belief. Everything here is built on different assumptions. Here, people think emotions are things you perform, not feel. Here, morality is reversed. Stealing is considered a form of generosity. Giving without asking is rude. Here, lying is a way to build trust, and truth is considered an aggressive act. And yet, they're happy. Healthier than the people you knew, more peaceful, less anxious, less violent. So now you face a deeper question. If everything feels wrong but works better, is it actually wrong? Or have you just been conditioned by one version of reality? Maybe your ideas of normal, true, and good were never absolute. Maybe they were just local customs. And now you're a foreigner in a world that claims to be your home. You start to adapt. You fake the customs, you learn their language, you rehearse their smiles. Eventually you laugh at the wrong moments too, you bow when you used to wave, you lie with the right tone of voice. And they stop treating you like a patient. They start calling you recovered. But you don't feel recovered, you feel rewritten. Because deep inside, a part of you is still watching. Still comparing. Still whispering, this isn't how things were. And yet, you can't prove it. There's no way to access your old world, no records, no visitors, no cracks in the simulation. You start to wonder, what if you were always here? What if your memories are fabrications, artifacts from a dream? What if your sense of rightness is just nostalgia? What if what you thought was truth was just a story you told yourself? That's the inverted Earth problem. It's not about aliens or dreams or brainwashing. It's about perspective. About how deeply our beliefs are shaped by the cultures we grow up in. About how the things we think are natural, love, justice, grief, success, are anything but. They're inherited. And if you had been born here in this upside-down world, you would have believed in it just as fiercely. You would have cried when people got married. You would have smiled when they died. You would have known in your bones that this is the way life should be. And now you're left wondering, what parts of your identity are real? What parts are simply echoes of the environment you grew up in? Are you truly you, or just a reflection of where you came from? You begin to look at your own world differently. The things you were taught. The emotions you were allowed to feel. the roles you were expected to play. And you ask, if I had been raised differently, if I had lived in another Earth, what version of me would have emerged? Would I be kinder, stronger, more honest, less certain? And if so, is that version more me than this on? That's the unsettling beauty of the inverted Earth. It doesn't just question the world. It questions the self. It reminds you that your identity, your entire way of being, is not fixed. It's fragile, contingent, built on habits, rules, assumptions. And if all of that can change, then who are you really? So here's the question the inverted Earth leaves you with. If everything you believe about life, love, and meaning had been flipped from birth, would you still be you, or would you become someone you now wouldn't even recognize? You're walking to work, it's early, the street is quiet, you cut through the park like always, the air is cool, the sky pale, and then you see it. A child flailing in a shallow pond, struggling, sinking. There's no one else around. You look down, you're wearing new shoes, expensive, limited edition, you just bought them, you hesitate. If you jump in, they'll be ruined, but if you don't, the child might drown. Of course you jump in. You ruin the shoes. You save the child. No one questions it, no one calls you a hero. You just did what any decent person would do. You helped someone who was dying because you could. But now imagine this. You wake up the next morning. No pond, no child, just your phone, notifications, ads, noise. You scroll past a link, donate $3 to save a child's life. You pause, and then you keep scrolling. You don't jump in. Not because you're cruel, not because you don't care, but because it's different somehow. Except it's not. That $3 could buy a malaria net, a vaccine, clean water. It could prevent a real child from dying. But you don't feel it the same way. Because you didn't see the child. Because they weren't right there. Because their suffering didn't interrupt your morning commute. And now the question creeps in, what's the difference? Why is the drowning child in front of you a moral emergency, but the one an ocean away is just a statistic? That's the thought experiment. Peter Singer posed it. The drowning child is not about shoes, it's about proximity, about empathy, about how we decide who deserves help. You'd ruin a $200 pair of sneakers to save a kid in front of you. But would you spend $200 to save 10 kids you'll never meet? Most people wouldn't. And now we're in dangerous territory. Because this isn't hypothetical. It's happening. Right now. Children are dying from preventable diseases, from hunger, from lack of clean water, and for the cost of a fancy dinner you could stop it, not symbolically, literally. But you don't. You rationalize. You say, I can't save everyone, true. You say, I didn't cause this, also true. You say, I give when I can, maybe. But deep down the truth is simpler. The suffering is too far away, too abstract, too silent. And so you go on with your day, just like I do, just like most of us do. But the thought lingers. If you would save the drowning child in the pond, because they're right there, then why don't you save the ones drowning in poverty, in war, in neglect? The excuses start to crack. You begin to see your own double standard. You realize that morality, true morality, isn't about feelings, it's about action. It's not about who tugs at your heart, it's about who needs you. It's not about whether you feel heroic, it's about whether someone gets to live. And now the experiment starts to hurt. Because it forces you to look at yourself. It forces you to ask, what kind of person am I really? Not in theory, in practice. You tell yourself you're good, that you help, that you care. But when the cost is invisible, when the drowning child is hidden by distance, culture, language, you do nothing. And now you wonder, is goodness just convenience? Is morality just proximity? Or is it something deeper? Singer's challenge isn't just philosophical, it's practical, it dares you to live by your own values. To make ethics uncomfortable. Because real compassion doesn't wait for tragedy to knock on your door. It doesn't need a crying face or a viral photo or a breaking news banner. Real compassion says, if I can help, I must. Even if I never see the result. Even if I never hear the thank you. Even if no one ever knows. It's not about guilt, it's about clarity. The world is full of invisible ponds. The children are drowning. And your wallet, your choices, your attention are the lifeboats. So here's the question the drowning child leaves you with. If you would save a child in front of you but not one far away, was it really about the child or about you? You walk into a massive, sterile room. Inside are monkeys. Thousands, millions, maybe more. Each one seated in front of an old-fashioned typewriter, clacking away, randomly, relentlessly. The sound is deafening, chaos made of clicks. You're told this is a thought experiment. Leave the monkeys long enough and eventually one will type the complete works of Shakespeare. Word for word, punctuation perfect, pure chance. You laugh, it sounds absurd. But then you realize it's true. With infinite time and infinite randomness, every possible text must eventually appear. Not just Shakespeare, but also the Bible, the Constitution, your diary, every love letter never sent, every memory never spoken. Everything. This is the infinite monkey theorem. It's not about monkeys, it's about probability. It's about how randomness, given enough time, can produce meaning. And suddenly, the world starts to shimmer. Because if that's true, what about us? You sit in a room filled with neurons, firing randomly, relentlessly. Thoughts appear, ideas, dreams, words. Are you so different from the monkeys? You type your life letter by letter, day by day, trying to make sense, trying to tell a story, but how much of it is you? How much is just randomness dressed up as reason? You begin to see the cracks in the idea of control. Maybe the moment you met your best friend wasn't fate, it was a monkey at a keyboard, typing the right name at the right time. Maybe your greatest idea was a cosmic typo. Maybe your love, your grief, your very sense of self is a fluke. And that's terrifying. Because we don't like randomness. We crave patterns. We invent gods, destinies, algorithms, anything to tame the noise. But the monkeys keep typing. And the more you think about it, the more it starts to feel like everything you've ever known is just one of infinite configurations in a chaotic universe. Not the best one. Not the right one. Just the one that happened. You look at the stars, you feel small, insignificant. But then a strange shift happens. You start to see the beauty in the chaos. The odds of one monkey typing Hamlet are astronomically low. But the odds of you, your face, your voice, your exact life are even lower. Yet here you are. Against all probability. A conscious being. Able to feel awe. Able to wonder. Able to ask if you're just a monkey in a bigger room. And suddenly, the randomness doesn't feel meaningless, it feels miraculous. Because yes, if you had infinite monkeys and infinite time, they'd eventually write every book. But they'd also write this book, the one you're living. The one with the heartbreak, the joy, the mistakes, the second chances. Your story. And if randomness gave you this moment, maybe it deserves a little more respect. Because even if nothing was meant to happen, something did. You happened. And that matters. So here's the question the infinite monkey theorem leaves you with. If everything you are is just one lucky arrangement of cosmic noise, does that make your story less meaningful or infinitely more rare? You step into a sleek, silver booth. A voice says, "Welcome to the teleporter. Please remain still while your body is scanned, disassembled atom by atom, and instantly reconstructed on the other side of the planet." You hesitate. But people do this every day now. It's safe, fast, painless. Just step in and a perfect copy of you will appear in Tokyo while this version, your current body, is quietly vaporized. You take a breath, nod. The countdown begins, 3, 2, 1. And then nothing. You're in Tokyo. You feel normal, you look the same memories, same scars, same sense of self. But the thought creeps in, am I still me? Or did I just die and something else took my place? That's the teletransportation paradox. It asks, what does it mean to be you? Is it your body, your brain, your memories, your consciousness? Because technically, the person standing in Tokyo isn't made of the same atoms. It's a replica, perfect, sure, but still a copy. The original was destroyed. So did you survive? Or were you replaced? And now the unease begins. Because if identity is just memory and pattern, then maybe continuity doesn't matter. Maybe you die every night when you go to sleep and wake up as someone else who just thinks they're you. Maybe you are just the illusion of a story being told across time. And now you wonder, what if they didn't destroy the original? What if the original you stepped out of the booth in New York, while the copy also stepped out in Tokyo? Now there are two of you. Same thoughts, same feelings, same love for coffee, same secrets. Which one is real? Which one is you? You can't both be. But how do you choose? Do you flip a coin? Do you let the law decide? Do you kill one? And which one would you want to be? Suddenly you realize identity isn't a line, it's a fork. And the more you think about it, the more everything splits. Every memory, every decision, every new cell in your body. You're constantly changing, replacing, evolving. Maybe you're not a thing at all. Maybe you're a process. And if that's true, then maybe the teleportation didn't kill you. Maybe it just continued you in a different place. But something still feels wrong. Because you don't remember dying. You only remember arriving. So if the real you is the one who stepped in and was destroyed, then maybe what you are now is a ghost. A shadow with your smile. A copy that thinks it's original. And now you can't stop thinking, if technology ever made this real, would you use it? Would you trust it? Would you climb into a machine that promises to kill you, but says it's okay because something else will wake up pretending to be you? Because maybe that's already happening. Maybe consciousness itself is a loop of deaths and rebirths, second by second, and we just call it life because we don't know what else to call it. Maybe we're all just copies of copies, clinging to the idea that we're continuous. Because that idea is comforting and necessary. So here's the question the teletransportation paradox leaves you with. If something could copy you perfectly, memories, feelings, everything, and you died in the process, would that still count as survival? Or would it mean that you, the only version you've ever truly known, just quietly ceased to exist? You've heard the story before. The wires, the tank, the glowing fluid, your brain, suspended in a lab, fed signals by a supercomputer. Every sight, every sound, every memory, an illusion. A simulation so perfect you never questioned it. But let's go further. Let's say you do find out. Let's say a glitch happens, a flicker, a voice in the dark, and someone tells you this isn't real. You laugh, shrug it off, but the doubt takes root. You test it. You try to break the pattern, do something spontaneous, something the simulation wouldn't expect. You spin in circles, you scream in an empty room, you say nonsense out loud, but the world stays consistent, too consistent. So you try harder. You ask questions no one answers. You dig for proof that never comes. You realize you can't get out. You don't even know what you're trying to get out of. The walls are made of your own perception. And then it hits you. If the world is fake, what about you? What are you in a world of code and illusion? Are your memories real, your failings, your sense of right and wrong? Or are they programmed, parameters in a file, preferences in a simulation? You look at your hands, they feel real, but that means nothing. You felt things in dreams too, you've cried in your sleep. You remember Zhuangzi, the butterfly who dreamed he was a man. And now you don't know which side of the dream you're on. Here's the deeper problem. What if everything is a brain in a vat? Not just you. Everyone. What if the people you love are just fragments of your own simulation? What if no one else has a mind? What if they're echoes, placeholders, generated responses? You search their eyes for something, some evidence of inner life, but you only see what you expect to see. Empathy, humor, pain, but all of that could be code. What do you trust? Your mind, that's the most compromised part. Your senses, those are the wires. Your memories, those are part of the trick. You begin to spiral. You want something true, something that can't be faked. You close your eyes, you wait. And then quietly a thought emerges. I exist. That's all you know. You can't prove the world exists. You can't prove your body exists, but you can't doubt that you're doubting. And that's something. That's Descartes. Cogito ergo sum. But even that feels thin. Because what good is I exist if you don't know what you are? A person. A process. A glitch. You open your eyes, the world rushes back in. The smell of coffee, the sound of traffic, a message from a friend. You answer it. You keep living. Not because you solved anything, but because you have no other choice. You start to wonder, maybe truth isn't the point. Maybe reality doesn't need to be proven. Maybe it just needs to be felt. Because if you cry and it hurts, does it matter if the pain is simulated? If you laugh with someone and it brings you joy, does it matter if they're real? Maybe meaning doesn't come from the source. Maybe it comes from the experience. Even if you're a brain in a vat. Even if none of this is real. So here's the question this version of the brain in a vat leaves you with. If everything around you is an illusion, but your emotions are real, then maybe the truth isn't what matters most. Maybe what matters is how you live inside the dream. You find an old photo. It's you as a child standing beside a wooden ship in a museum. A plaque reads, "The Ship of Theseus, every part replaced over centuries, but still the same ship." You didn't care back then, just smiled for the camera. But now, years later, the thought hits you like a wave. If every part of the ship has been replaced, every plank, every nail, is it still the same ship? You ask around. Some say yes, the form, the idea, the history, those are what matter. Others say no. If the materials are gone, so is the original. What you see is a replica, not a relic. And then you think of yourself. Every cell in your body has changed since that photo. Skin sheds, bones replace, your memories have blurred, your opinions have shifted. You're not the same child smiling in front of the ship. So are you still you? Or are you a replica of the person who once stood there? That's the paradox. The Ship of Theseus forces you to confront identity, its shape, its persistence, its illusion. Let's make it weirder. Suppose they kept the original planks, stored them in a warehouse, then rebuilt a second ship using those old parts. Now which one is the real Ship of Theseus? The one in the museum with the continuous history? Or the one made of original parts with no story but real wood? What matters more, origin or continuity? You apply this to your life. Think of old friendships, they've changed, you've changed, but the label remains, we've known each other forever, even if neither of you resembles who you were. Is it still the same friendship? You think about love, relationships that weather time. Each person evolves, old habits die, new ones form, you're not who you were when you met, but you still say us. Is that still you and them, or just an agreement to keep pretending? And then yourself. You feel like the same person, but are you? The you who believed in fairy tales, the you who feared the dark, the you who fell in love for the first time. Where are they now? Gone, replaced, or still here somewhere under all the new layers? You want to believe there's a core, an essence that stays constant, something that makes you no matter how much you change. But what if that essence is just the story you keep telling? What if you is a ship constantly under repair, never finished, never original, always in motion? That's beautiful and terrifying, because if you are always changing, then so is everyone else. No one stays, not really. We're all ships drifting, rebuilt every day, by time, by loss, by joy. You remember someone saying, "You've changed." And maybe they were right. But maybe that was the point. Maybe staying the same isn't proof of identity. Maybe changing and still calling it you is the real miracle. So here's the question the Ship of Theseus leaves you with. If every part of you changes, body, mind, memory, but you still feel like you, then what exactly are you holding on to when you say, "This is who I am"? Someone offers you a deal. They show you a sleek humming pod. They say, "Climb in, you'll feel no pain, no fear, no doubt. Inside, you'll live the perfect life. Every dream fulfilled, every pleasure felt, every relationship meaningful, every success guaranteed. You won't know it's fake. To you, it will feel completely real." You pause. They continue, "We've scanned your brain. We know exactly what would make you happy. Inside this machine, you'll be loved, respected, fulfilled. You'll be the best version of yourself." But there's a catch. Once you go in, you can't come out. Not because they won't let you, but because you won't want to. You'll forget the outside world ever existed. You look at the machine. It looks peaceful, warm, safe. But your hands tremble. Because here's the question, if it feels real, is that enough? This is the Experience Machine, a thought experiment by philosopher Robert Nozick, and it challenges your deepest instincts. Would you plug in? Most people say no. They say, "I want to live in the real world, even if it's hard, even if it hurts." But why? What's so sacred about reality? Pain is still pain, joy is still joy. If your brain believes it and your heart feels it, does it matter where it comes from? Some say yes. They argue that a good life isn't just about feeling good, it's about being good, about doing things that matter, about actions in a real world with real consequences. You can't help others in the machine, you can't change the world, you can't even grow. Because every challenge, every triumph, it's all scripted, designed for your satisfaction. You're not becoming anything. You're just experiencing. But others push back. They say, "Why suffer, why struggle? If my brain can be perfectly content, why not let it be? Isn't the point of life to be happy? Is it noble to reject happiness just because it's artificial?" You think about your own life. The dreams you've chased, the people you've loved, the heartbreaks, the failures, the nights you couldn't sleep, the mornings filled with hope. Would you trade them? Would you erase every scar, every doubt, every fight, if it meant a life of endless pleasure? And if you say no, why? Is it pride, morality, fear? Or something else? Maybe you sense that meaning doesn't come from ease. That the things you value most, love, purpose, achievement, only matter because they're hard, because they cost you something, because they could have gone wrong but didn't. You look at the machine again. It promises perfection. But maybe that's the problem. Because perfect isn't human. Perfect is sterile, cold, empty. You wonder if everyone plugged in, what would be left of the world? Who would grow food? Who would raise children? Who would make art? Would it even matter? Or would we all be locked away, alone in bliss, forgetting each other, forgetting ourselves? Maybe that's the scariest part. Not that the machine is fake, but that it makes you forget what it means to live. So here's the question the Experience Machine leaves you with. If you could live a perfect dream forever, never knowing it was fake, would you choose that life, or the imperfect, painful, unpredictable world you already know is real? You're dying. Maybe not now, but someday. Maybe in 50 years, maybe tomorrow, you don't know, but the clock is ticking. And one night the question hits you, what if God exists? Not in the vague spiritual sense, but a specific conscious being, watching, judging, rewarding, punishing. What if heaven and hell are real? You try to reason through it, think like a philosopher, you weigh the evidence, but it's inconclusive. Some smart people believe, some don't. Miracles, scriptures, experiences, they're all contested. No proof, no certainty. And then you remember Blaise Pascal, a 17th century mathematician, a genius, and a man terrified of the void. He didn't try to prove God. He made a bet, a wager. He said you must choose to believe or not to believe. There is no neutral option. Not choosing is still choosing. And here's how the wager works. If you believe in God and you're right, you gain everything: eternal happiness, salvation, infinite reward. If you believe and you're wrong, you lose nothing, maybe a few Sundays, some rituals, a little time. If you don't believe and you're right, you gain what? A bit more freedom, a few more vices. But if you don't believe and you're wrong, you lose everything. Infinite punishment, eternal regret. So Pascal asks, why wouldn't you believe? It's not about certainty, it's about risk, probability, payoff. It's a pragmatic choice. But something about it feels off. You don't want to believe just in case. That feels shallow, insincere, like lying to the universe, like gaming the system. Can belief be a choice? Can you force faith just to win a bet? Pascal thought yes. He said, act as if you believe, go to church, read the scriptures, perform the rituals. Eventually, belief will follow. You're not so sure. You think about your own beliefs, the things you hold sacred, the things you reject. You didn't choose them like picking from a menu. They formed over time, from experience, from emotion. Belief isn't a switch. It's a story. Still, the wager haunts you. Because the logic is clean, cold, mathematical, and it doesn't care how you feel. You realize it's not just about God. Pascal's wager applies to everything unknown. What if your partner is lying? What if your friend secretly resents you? What if your child will someday blame you for how they were raised? You don't know, you can't know. So you make bets. On trust, on love, on life. You believe not because you're sure, but because the alternative feels worse. You think about morality. What if there's no justice after death? Does that make cruelty more acceptable? Or does it make kindness even more sacred, because this life is all we get? Pascal forces you to choose. Do you live as if life has eternal meaning, or as if it does? Do you act as if someone is watching, or as if no one is? And which of those choices makes you a better person? A more courageous one? A more hopeful one? In the end, Pascal's wager isn't about religion. It's about what you do when the stakes are infinite, but the evidence is missing. It's about choosing your life like it matters, even if you'll never know if you were right. So here's the question Pascal's wager leaves you with. If you can never prove what lies beyond this life, will you live as if it's nothing or as if it's everything?